interests at heart, also cares about OPEC, and it cares about its political power within OPEC. That's not something that Russia really cares for. And so Saudi Arabia is saying, look, we said basically at this OPEC meeting, we see a crisis in demand. We need to cut oil production. We're going to do our part, but we need you to also do your part. We're not going it alone anymore, because back in December, we essentially saw Saudi Arabia saying, let's all cut, but we're going to cut so much more as an incentive. And Russia is looking at this saying, why should we cut when we can get the Saudis to do it? And the Saudis said, no, we're not going to do that this time. And now you've got a price war and a production war with a very uncertain outcome for Saudi Arabia. Saudi Arabia can win the production war. They've got more spare capacity. But is there really a winner in a production war where you can't find buyers for that oil? And that's really the question.
Yeah, Ellen, that's kind of where I wanted to go. I mean, I get Russia may have different agenda, may have a different agenda than OPEC and Saudi Arabia, but they don't benefit from this plunging oil price. So what's kind of how much pain can they really take, do you think?
Well, right now they've said that they can take pain for 6 to 10 years, that they're willing to accept prices between, $25 and $30 a barrel, which, by the way, they're not really making money at that price point, whereas Saudi Arabia can make money. But they're saying, look, we've got a $150 billion sovereign wealth fund, and we're willing to sell those assets to fund our budget for 6 to 10 years. So whereas on Saudi Arabia's side, they can pump oil for $2.80. So if they're selling it at $25 a barrel, they're still making a profit, whereas Russian companies might not necessarily be making a profit. But is Saudi Arabia really willing to deploy other funds to stave off budgetary issues? And that's a totally different question. And it's not clear that Saudi Arabia is prepared with its sovereign wealth fund to do the same kind of thing that Russia is.
Ellen, it doesn't sound like there's an easy resolution to this then.
Yeah, I don't see an easy resolution. I think that if they got together and they started talking, that tensions would definitely come down. And I do think that there is continued communication between the two. You've got a Russian oil ministry, a Russian energy ministry that wants to still sell Saudi Arabia nuclear technology and liquefied natural gas. So it's not like all communication is suddenly cut. This isn't, the Cold War between Saudi Arabia and Russia, but it's not going to be resolved tomorrow.
Well,
that's for sure.
But so let's just sort of extrapolate out. If this is a prolonged issue, tension, locking of heads here over what production ought to be, what is going to be the consequence for the entire oil complex, in particular the shale patch, which we're seeing right now getting crushed in the high-yield bond market, to also the oil majors, which shares have actually been just absolutely devastated today?
Yeah, they're going to have a tough time. I don't think that it's a death knell for the shale oil patch, because the assets are still there and they're still going to be valuable. And so you're going to have people getting crushed, but you will see more consolidation. You'll see, the players that can, the oil majors, taking on, buying up good producing assets. It won't be fun there, and the area is definitely going to experience an economic contraction, but you can't kill the assets. They're still there. However, places like Venezuela and Iran that are really on the brink are going to have a very hard time of it, particularly because Russia has played such a big role in kind of keeping Venezuela limping along.
Ellen Wald, thank you so much for joining us. Ellen Wald is the president of Transversal Consulting. She's also a Bloomberg Opinion contributor, and we always appreciate her commentary and thoughts on the global energy markets with her great experience. I'm looking at WTI crude. It's at $34 a barrel here, down about 16.5%. The low in this trading session was $27 a barrel for WTI. So coming off the bottoms, but still an ugly day when looking at global crude.
Yeah, I mean, I think that this is sort of the big existential question facing the shale patch, which is what will the assets be worth at the end of the day when things do emerge and turn around, and who's going to own them, right? I mean, This is the question: is are we going to see the Exxons of the world come in and buy some of these struggling shale producers, or are we going to see them just go out of business and have to be rediscovered all over again when oil prices, or if oil prices materially rise?
Yeah, I've been speaking really over the last year or so for some distressed investors, distressed credit investors looking at this patch. And quite frankly, they were probably too early given what we're seeing right here. So I'm not sure if there's going to be real value of people at this stage right now, maybe some consolidation from some of the bigger companies. This is Bloomberg.
This is Bloomberg Money Minute. Stocks plunging 6%, whipsawing back from losses that topped 7% and triggering a trading halt. A price war in the oil market rattling financial markets already on edge over the spreading coronavirus. Friday's OPEC meeting in Vienna failed to reach an agreement about further oil output cuts. Russia and Saudi Arabia poised to flood the market with cheap oil, but there's already lots of crude in the market and demand isn't there because of the coronavirus. Crude right now tumbling down 20% at $33 a barrel. An oil price crash, if sustained, would upend politics and budgets around the world and add pressure on central bankers trying to avoid a recession. The S&P 500 is down now 18% from its February all-time high, threatening to end the record-long bull market that began 11 years ago today. The New York Stock Exchange circuit breakers halted trading for 15 minutes after the open in a move designed to limit panic. Courtney Donahoe, Bloomberg Radio.
Not completing high school is more of a social thing than it was an academic thing. Even though all these years have passed, I still had that longing to have my diploma.
At age 30, Carissa finished her high school diploma.
If you're even considering getting your high school diploma, you can do it.
No one gets a diploma alone. If you're thinking of finishing your high school diploma, you have help. Find free adult education classes near you at finishyourdiploma.org. That's finishyourdiploma.org. Brought to you by the Dollar General Literacy Foundation and the Ad Council.
Are you interested in a challenging and exciting career? One where you can be part of solving complex challenges across industries and geographies. Bloomberg's ever-expanding technology, data, news, and media services foster innovation, empower clients, and offer nearly limitless opportunities for career growth. Visit Bloomberg.com/careers today to view our current job opportunities. Bloomberg LP is an equal opportunity employer. The address once again is Bloomberg.com/careers. In-depth.
We've all been in one, but how much do you really know about black cabs? For instance, did you know that a black cab has to be tall enough to accommodate an individual wearing a bowler hat? That's a lot of space for you and your briefcase. Or that Free Now drivers can use the bus lanes, the perfect getaway to make your meeting in time. And with 2-minute central London pickups, you needn't waste time searching for a taxi. Just download the Free Now app today and take the hassle out of getting round London.
Hey, have you heard? The Mayor of London has launched his latest van scrappage scheme to help tackle London's toxic air. Small businesses or sole traders like me with a polluting van could now get £7,000, which you could use to trade up to a Euro 6 vehicle. And you could get an extra £2,500 towards running costs if you go electric. The scheme is now even easier to qualify for, and it's open to any businesses with up to 50 employees, like mine. So, I'm going to search TfL scrappage to see if I'm eligible and apply. You should do the same. To the Mayor of London and TfL, every journey matters.
This ad is made from 100% recycled commercials. Just like Smart Water's
all new
bottles are made from
100% recycled
plastic.
What's that number again?
100%. Every Smart Water bottle is made using recycled plastic, and because it's still
100%
recyclable, the plastic will be used again
and again.
Smart Water, now in a 100% recycled plastic bottle. Label and cap 100% recyclable, but not made from recycled plastic. Yet. We're working on it.
At Asda, with our great range of beers and cider, it looks like you're hosting. Get 2 packs for just £18 or just £10 each. Like 12 bottles of Corona or 10 cans of Copperberg Cherry. Cracking brands, refreshing prices. Don't compromise. Asda. Save money. Live better. Selected stores subject to availability. Offer ends 18th of March. 330 millilitres each. Drink aware.
Petrol or electric? Why choose petrol and electric? Discover the BMW plug-in hybrid and electric range. 14th to the 21st of March. Visit your BMW retailer. Sometimes electric, always BMW. Participating retailers only.
Switch to Sky Broadband Superfast. It's so reliable, we'll guarantee your speeds or money back. And for a short time only, it's just £25 a month for 18 months with a $19.95 setup fee. So stay connected with super reliable, super fast broadband at a super low price. Switch or recontract today. Search sky.com. Offer ends 12th of March. Prices may change during this period. Includes Sky Pay as you talk. Sky Fibre areas only. Speeds vary by location. 1 month subscription refund if speeds drop below minimum download speed for 3 consecutive days. Claim twice in minimum term after first 14 days. See sky.com/guarantee.
How do you channel your inner calm? Meditation? Yoga? Or within the sanctuary of your Citroën C3 with 11 driving aids and wide, comfortable seats? Calm really does come from within. Citroën C3, now £199 per month with an initial rental of £199 and £500 of lease price.
Citroën.
Citroën UK Limited, a credit broker, not a lender. Personal lease, you will not own the vehicle. Offer on field PureTech 83 manual. 6,000 miles per annum. Guarantee may be required. Terms, eligibility criteria and return conditions apply. PSA Finance UK Limited. Participating dealer stock vehicles ordered between 1st and 22nd and registered by March 31st.
Broadcasting live from the Bloomberg Interactive Brokers Studio in New York. Bloomberg 1130 to Washington, D.C. Bloomberg 99.1 to Boston. Bloomberg 106.1 to San Francisco. Bloomberg 960 to the country. Sirius XM Channel 119. And around the globe, the Bloomberg Business app and BloombergRadio.com. This is Bloomberg Markets.
Coming up on Bloomberg Markets on this historic day in the markets from bonds to stocks, we speak with Gina Martin-Adams, our chief equity strategist for Bloomberg Intelligence, to get a sense of what to look for in terms of finding a bottom. Plus, a look at oil, which is getting devastated by the truce that is yet to be had or yet to even be discussed between Saudi Arabia and Russia. Right now, though, let's head over to Greg Jarrett and get the numbers. Greg.
Wall Street's recovering just modestly, Lisa, after the trading resumed. Energy and financial suffer heavy losses as crude is pounded after Saudi Arabia said they're going to pump. We talked with Kit Jukes, Societe Generale. He tells Bloomberg at this point, markets are just going to have to deal with what's being called the coronavirus effect.
I don't think that we can alter the fact that we're in for a period of globally weaker growth from this point in time, and that the main thing to solve is the human impact of the coronavirus, and the secondary thing to solve is something orderly in oil.
We check the markets every 15 minutes throughout the trading day. The S&P 500 is currently down 5.6%, down 165. The Dow's down 5.6%, down 1,446. And the NASDAQ is down 5.3%, down 455. The 10-year is up 2.2. And let's see, that would be with a yield of 0.5192. So the 10 years up 2.3% now. West Texas Intermediate is down 16.9% at $34.30 a barrel. COMEX Gold is little changed at $16.7220 an ounce. The dollar yen, 102.26. The euro is $1.14.18, and the British pound $1.31.06. That is a Bloomberg Business Flash. I'm Greg Jarrett.
This is Bloomberg Markets with Lisa Abramowitz and Paul Sweeney on Bloomberg Radio.
Well, with markets in free fall this morning, some might be tempted in the equity markets to maybe dip their toe, try to find some value. Some are going to say, I'm not getting anywhere near this freight train right here. Let's get an informed opinion from Gina Martin-Adams. She's a senior equity strategist for Bloomberg Intelligence. She joins us here in our Bloomberg Interactive Broker Studio. So, Gina, what do you make of not just today, but maybe the last 10 or days or 2 weeks, this market activity we've seen in the equities?
Yeah, I think the market started off at an overbought condition. You have to consider that as the starting point. We were overbought. We were likely overconfident. Valuations were well above our modeled estimates for where fair value was. So we started to see that deflation with the coronavirus concerns. And as those spread around the world, obviously that created a tremendous amount of technical weakness in the markets, but did start to create some fundamental value at the very least. Now you've got the destabilizing effect of oil prices adding on to the pressure. So it's almost like this pile-on effect that the equity market is experiencing. My sense is you don't normally get a 5 to 7% decline in a single day on stocks, and usually those are representative of pretty significant panic lows. But you can't eliminate the possibility that there's further downside from here because you're trying to predict human behavior and risk tolerance, and that's just impossible to do. I think a lot of this for investors is going to depend upon your time horizon. If you're thinking, I got to be up and I've got to be up in the next 2 weeks, your time horizon is probably too short to have a whole lot of confidence. If your time horizon is the next 15 years, I want to look for some value for a 15-year time horizon, then you've got to start thinking about sharpening your pencils and finding some ideas in the equity market, because true value has been unlocked here. When we look at things like the oil price impact, for instance, on fundamentals, the energy sector is 3% of the market cap of the S&P 500 now. So a falling oil price is not particularly detrimental to the earnings outlook, unless it's accompanied by, a snowball effect of serious economic recession emerging, big declines in new orders growth, employment conditions deteriorating significantly. Those are the things that you want to look at. And if that's the case, then you want to start to price recession. I do say to price recession, we've probably got quite a bit of downside risk still to come. Will we have recession or not is still a toss-up.
Well, that's exactly where I wanted to go. What would it look like for us to price in recession? How much worse would it get?
Yeah. So our view is to price recession, we probably have to go to around 26.65. That's taking an assumption of where the fair value multiple is, considering where interest rates are. And we all know that interest rates are extremely accommodative for equity valuations right now. But also your average recessionary decline in EPS, which is about 14% on earnings. To combine those two models, and you get a downside risk for the S&P 500 of all the way down to 26.65, which is a bit more than your average recessionary decline. It's a more than 20% decline in stocks from peak to trough.
We're chatting with Gina Martin Adams from Bloomberg Intelligence. We have the S&P down 170. That's 5.7%. The Dow off about 1,500 points here. So, Gina, let's talk technical levels. I know you like to look at charts as well as the fundamentals here. Where are we kind of broad market in terms of support levels and that kind of thing?
Well, we busted through the 50% retracement level, which, we had been watching that pretty carefully. That's right around 2850, 2860 on the S&P 500. That's where we found stabilization 2 Fridays ago on that major capitulation low. We certainly didn't even test it last Friday, even though our closing low on Friday was pretty weak. So at this point, I think 2,800 is serving as some sort of round number resistance. It happens to mark a low from several low points over the course of the last year as well. Then you've got to get all the way back into the 2018 correction, which really is dicey technicals, right? I mean, there's just very few consistent levels to lean on back in that 2018 correction. I'm looking at 2,800 right now as the level to watch on the index.
How concerned are you about a panic among retail investors as they start to see some of the headlines and hear some of the rhetoric out of Wall Street today?
Yeah, it's really interesting. Our ETF team has actually done a lot of analysis on this, and the retail investor is the sort of one solid leg that's been in the equity market, even in August. Remember all the panic activity in the equity market that we experienced in August? We had a couple of 3% down days in the midst of only a 5% correction. It was very odd. Very similarly, this time around, the retail investor does not appear to be manipulating their portfolio. They're not really giving up the ghost on equities. So they are inherently a source of support, while the institutional investor has been significantly more volatile and more weak over the last couple of corrections. So I am somewhat concerned if we do get that kind of last bastion of stability capitulating on the equity rally, it could create a pretty big downdraft. But so far, that investor seems to be sticking it out.
Gina Martin Adams, thank you so much for being with us. Always illuminating. Gina Martin Adams, Chief Equity Strategist for us here at Bloomberg Intelligence. Insightful to hear about the fact that we're not even pricing in recession yet.
Yes.
We have another 5% more to go lower in the S&P before we get to the levels that would price that in, according to Gina Martin Adams, who has been absolutely stunning on this consistently throughout.
Absolutely, and it's we're starting to hear that recession word a little bit more today than we have even in the past couple of weeks.
Yeah, I mean, you've got these sort of twin issues or a multitude of issues coming together. Slower growth due to the concerns about the coronavirus paired now with the oil shock coming together to create an explosion in financial markets today. Right now, let's head to get the view from Washington, D.C. Nathan Hager there. Nathan.
All right, Lisa, thank you. A deputy governor of Sweden's central bank is among the latest patients to come down with the novel coronavirus. A spokesman for Riksbank says Martin Floden tested positive Friday after a visit to northern Italy, but the spokesman says he is feeling well and working from home. Spain is considering emergency measures after its number of cases nearly doubled overnight to 999. The Trump administration is said to be working on new measures to blunt the economic impact of the virus in the U.S. It could include a temporary expansion of paid sick leave as well as help for disrupted companies. Sarah Nelson is president of the Association of Flight Attendants International.
We need to be making sure that people can stay home if they're sick with paid sick leave and pay protection so that they're not making financial decisions that may hurt the larger community because they're coming to work sick.
And here in Washington, the Capitol Hill attending physician's office says several lawmakers have been notified that they came into contact with an infected person at a recent conservative conference outside Washington. Two Republicans, Senator Ted Cruz and Congressman Paul Gosar, have decided to isolate themselves after having contact with that patient. 6 states host Democratic primary contests tomorrow. Bloomberg's Amy Morris reports all eyes are on Michigan.
Bernie Sanders needs Michigan's delegates to catch up to Joe Biden, but he doesn't plan to drop out even if he doesn't win there. Michigan came through for Sanders in 2016, and he's counting on a repeat. Reverend Jesse Jackson has now endorsed Sanders, while Senators Kamala Harris and Cory Booker are endorsing Biden during a rally in Detroit tonight. A disclaimer, Michael Bloomberg, the founder and majority owner of Bloomberg LP, the parent company of Bloomberg Radio, has endorsed Joe Biden for president. In Washington, I'm Amy Morris, Bloomberg Radio.
And I'm Nathan Hager. This is Bloomberg.
Asset managers who seize change to launch new strategies, add distribution channels, or exploit new technology to re-engineer the investor experience are often rewarded. However, in an industry paralyzed with complexity, few act with agility or decisively. Few run their businesses strategically, yet the most competitive managers in the market know with the right partner and a flexible operating system, you can. Go boldly toward change with SEI Investment Manager Services.
I'm Steve Meyer, president of SEI's Investment Manager Services. At SEI, we understand the emerging forces that will define success for asset managers and what firms will need to compete tomorrow. That's why we continually optimize SEI's global operating platform. If your business requires greater agility, our advanced technology, integrated best-in-class systems, and multi-asset expertise can be your catalyst for business transformation.
With SEI Investment Manager Services, you lead the charge in a competitive marketplace. Learn more at SEIC.com/seize change.
Business is constantly evolving. Is your financial printer evolving to keep ahead of the curve? At Command Financial, we are redefining financial printing by providing industry-leading expertise, leveraging technology, and honing processes and best practices. Every day, Command helps SEC registrants, as well as members of their working groups, including securities attorneys and investment bankers, prepare, file, and disseminate regulatory and disclosure documents, such as registration statements, M&A documents, and mutual fund prospectuses and reports. Command provides a full range of services to help you effectively complete your deal, meet your disclosure requirements, and achieve your shareholder communications objectives. Visit our website at commandfinancial.com and learn how we're evolving, not only with the times, but also with your business requirements. Command Financial, redefining financial printing.
Delayed at the dentist and now you're late for school pickup. You need a free now. Need to take the dog to the vet before lunch. Should have gotten a free now. Trying to get 4 kids and their baggage to the airport. Free now. Sometimes you can't get from A to B fast enough. Download the Free Now app today for quick pickups and reliable drivers, no matter the situation. Less hassle, more hustle with Free Now.
Hey, have you heard? The Mayor of London has launched his latest van scrappage scheme to help tackle London's toxic air. Small businesses or sole traders like me with a polluting van could now get £7,000, which you could use to trade up to a Euro 6 vehicle. And you could get an extra £2,500 towards running costs if you go electric. The scheme is now even easier to qualify for, and it's open to any businesses with up to 50 employees, like mine. So, I'm going to search TfL Scrappage to see if I'm eligible and apply. You should do the same. To the Mayor of London and TfL, every journey matters.
At Asda, with our great range of beers and cider, it looks like you're hosting. Get 2 packs for just £18 or just £10 each, like 12 bottles of Corona or 10 cans of Copperberg Cherry. Cracking brands, refreshing prices. Don't compromise. Asda. Save money, live better. Selected stores subject to availability. Offer ends 18th of March. 330 millilitres each. Drink aware.
Take the next left, take a right, and you've arrived at your Vauxhall retailer, where you'll find the all-new Vauxhall Corsa. Test drive now and you can take advantage of a £500 deposit contribution with 4.9% APR representative. Book your test drive of the all-new Corsa now. Vauxhall. New rules Britannia. £500 allowance provided as deposit contribution on qualifying new Vauxhalls. Conditional sale and personal contract purchase only. Subject to status, T's and C's, 18 plus Vauxhall Finance. Registered by 2nd of April 2020. Search Vauxhall Test Drive.
The moment you realise you've drilled through an electric cable. The moment you realise that doesn't just mean no telly on the wall, but no telly full stop. The moment you realise you've got British Gas Home Care. And not just your electrics, but your plumbing, heating and drains are all covered. So the moment you've got a problem, make it our problem. British Gas, here to solve. Search British Gas Home Care.
Switch to Sky Broadband Superfast. It's so reliable, we'll guarantee your speeds or money back. And for a short time only, it's just £25 a month for 18 months with a $19.95 setup fee. So stay connected with super reliable, super fast broadband at a super low price. Switch or recontract today. Search sky.com. Offer ends 12th of March. Prices may change during this period. Includes Sky Pay As You Talk. Sky Fibre areas only. Speeds vary by location. 1 month subscription refund if speeds drop below minimum download speed for 3 consecutive days. Claim twice in minimum term after first 14 days. See sky.com/guarantee.
The puck drops. 12 players face off to win. The suspense is pure torture, but you wouldn't miss this for the world. TuneIn brings you every minute of the NHL season. Listen live to hockey when it matters most on TuneIn.
Like what you're listening to? Want to make getting back to it easier? Use the favorite button to keep track of the stations and podcasts you love on TuneIn. Just tap or click the heart icon to add it to your favorites. Then find all your go-to audio under the Favorites tab. Pretty easy, right?
This week on the New Yorker Radio Hour, we'll ask whether America is ready to elect a Democratic Socialist for president. Plus, the science fiction legend William Gibson on climate change and the end of the future.
How often do you hear the phrase, the 22nd century? Don't hear it. We no longer have that sense of cultural anticipation.
Listen to this episode of the New Yorker Radio Hour on TuneIn today.
Headlines and breaking news 24 hours a day at Bloomberg.com, the Bloomberg Business app, and on Quick Take by Bloomberg. This is a Bloomberg Business Flash.
Stocks are down almost 6% right now, whipsawing back from losses at the top 7% and triggering a trading halt as full-blown crude price war rattled financial markets. With that, we're already pretty shaken up by what's going on with coronavirus. Treasury yields plummeted, oil's down more than 30%, and credit markets have buckled. We look at the numbers every 15 minutes throughout the trading day on Bloomberg Radio. Right now, the S&P 500 is down 5.8%, down 173. The Dow's down 6%, down 1554.91. The NASDAQ is down 5.6%, down 479. The 10-year is up 2.1%. The yield is 0.5392%. West Texas Intermediate's down 7.7% at 33.56 a barrel. COMEX gold's up 1.3% at 16.7430 an ounce. The dollar yen 102.35. The euro is $1.1421, and the British pound is $1.3124. Hard hit. Brazilian assets began the week in a meltdown. Currencies tumbled to a record low. Stocks are poised for a bear market, and tumbling oil prices added to the coronavirus-fueled jitters right now. The currency, it's 29 reais to the dollar. That's a Bloomberg Business Flash. I'm Greg Jarrett.
This is Bloomberg Markets with Lisa Abramowitz and Paul Sweeney on Bloomberg Radio.
Oil prices tumbling after Saudi Arabia and Russia failed to meet some sort of agreement on production cuts and are actually now ramping up production, trying to drive prices even lower in order to hurt one another, cut off your nose to spite your face. Hard to understand the dynamics here, but really to walk us through, and someone who's been following the oil markets for years, Anne-Marie Hordern, Bloomberg reporter for television in particular. And Anne-Marie, I want to get your sense, given your expertise, particularly covering Saudi Arabia, what does the plunge in oil prices mean for that nation?
It's really dire for Saudi, looking at where their budget needs to be. They're at $84 a barrel the IMF has their budget pegged to. And no matter what everyone says about, MBS says about the Crown Prince, Mohammed bin Salman says about Vision 2030, diversifying, they are as reliant today on oil for their budget as they were 5 or 10 years ago. So they're really enslaved to crude for their economy. This is how they have social services, their military, etc. On top of that, we have Aramco falling below its IPO price. So this is obviously not going to be good for Aramco. Yasser was on the other day from the PIF, the Aramco chairman, saying they want to bring this internationally. They also had citizens, about 20% of the population bought into Aramco. And to do that, they actually let the banks lend out more. So really it could be a bit of, I look at this as somewhat of almost a bit of a financial crisis for the kingdom, for their budget and also for the citizens. They're going to be hit twofold from the oil price and the budget, but also the effects of the Aramco and all the citizens that bought into that.
All right, so Anne-Marie, I'm just shocked when I saw the news over the weekend. What do you think the game theory is here between Saudi Arabia and Russia?
I think right now it's gotten very personal between the Crown Prince and President Putin. I think the first mistake, and the Saudis really took a big gamble with this, and when they released that press release on Thursday, I thought, even though I was sitting here in New York, and usually when you're in Vienna, you can understand the pace and tone of a meeting, I thought that this is to the public, they're putting Putin in a corner. And I think that ultimatum did not sit well with the Kremlin. They did not want to set a precedent that every time OPEC wants something, they're just going to bow down to that. Putin has really become the world's energy czar, and that's become quite clear in all the past meetings. Deals were done once Russia signed on board. This is the first time OPEC said, we want to do this deal, take it or leave it. Now, I was in Riyadh a few weeks ago, and His Royal Highness Prince Abdulaziz said behind closed doors, I spoke to a number of people, though, that said basically what he said is he equated the coronavirus to a house on fire. And he said you can call the fire brigade, which the Saudis would want to do, or use a gardening hose. Call the fire brigade, maybe you'll lose some furniture, but your house still stands. They didn't use any of that. So this is an all-out price war. The Russians may be going after shale in a way, but I also think it's gotten personal. They don't want to show their cards. They don't want Saudis to be calling the shots. And then thirdly, if the Russians can get up to a point where they're taking over a lot of market share and they finally come back to the table, when they do decide to do a production deal, they're going to have to cut much less. So they'll keep more market share.
We're speaking with Anne-Marie Hordern of Bloomberg Television, talking about the oil market. She's been covering the oil markets for years and digging deep into the dynamics within the Middle East and Russia. And I have to wonder how much the shale production, the fact that the United States has become such a powerhouse of oil production, how much that has really called this into cold relief, that basically this is the culmination of tensions that have been building for a long time.
Yeah, every time OPEC Plus was cutting production, they were just making more room for American shale. And just last week, we saw American shale production hit a record. The same week that OPEC Plus is meeting to potentially cut production, which many say you're just creating more room for the shale industry. But this is seismic for the shale industry. They need about $40 a barrel to break even for some of these shale producers. And what we are now at WTI and Brent in the 30s, Goldman Sachs, Bank of America, they're all saying we could dip into the 20s on a Brent handle, which is insane for shale companies, which also have a ton of debt already. And already going into this meeting, many banks were saying it's going to be much harder to lend to these shale producers. Now it's going to be virtually impossible, and you could see some of them go bankrupt.
All right, so Anne-Marie, you've spent a lot of time in Vienna. You know the players here. It seems very dire at this point when I think about the relationship you said is personal between Saudi Arabia and Russia. Any idea how this might play out? Does somebody have to blink first?
I think someone would have to blink first. I know that they're likely on the OPEC level. There's going to be behind the scenes a lot of phone calls and a lot of attempted diplomacy. There is technically supposed to be a meeting March 18th. This is a technical committee. They get together and discuss the oil market between OPEC Plus. Whether or not that goes through remains to be seen. But at some point, they're going to have to come back to the table. I don't see how they cannot. Or the group completely splits up and OPEC could potentially just go their own way, but OPEC's not going to want to cut now unless Russia's on board.
What happens to Venezuela? What happens to Nigeria? What happens to all of these other nations?
These countries, this is going to be really difficult for their budgets. I mean, Venezuela, production's already in free fall. They needed a higher price just to squeeze out anything they could. Similar for Iran. Also, countries like Libya at the moment, they're dealing with a civil unrest. They're practically offline. When they do come back online, though, they're going to need a higher oil price. So this can also mean potential more disruption in the Middle East, given how low these prices are.
How do you think it might play out for, again, the shale? That's kind of a near and dear to, obviously a lot of U.S. investors here. Do you expect a real fallout, a real shakeout here? Do you bet maybe some consolidation from some of the bigger players coming in? This could get ugly.
Yeah, potentially to have like some of the bigger players, like Exxon likely can maybe come in, or Chevron, or ConocoPhillips. But the thing is, this is dire for shale. I was just looking to see, I heard the president was tweeting about this means lower fuel prices. In the short term, everyone's going to talk about the fact that at the pump, it's going to be much cheaper to now fill up your car and et cetera. But this is going to be dire for the shale. They're going to have to be some consolidation, I imagine. Already this morning, Diamondback was out saying that they're cutting some of their projects, putting less people on rigs, operating less rigs. I think you're going to see a lot of that. I think it depends how long this goes on for. If it's a few months, they could probably weather it. If this goes on for a year or two, like the last time they tried to get Russia and Saudi Arabia at the table, that took about 2 years. I don't know how many shale producers can withstand that.
Anne-Marie Horton, thank you so much for joining us. Anne-Marie covers all things oil, OPEC on a global scale for Bloomberg News, and we're lucky to have her in our Bloomberg Interactive Broker studio. Usually she's over in London or Vienna or some other place tracking down the global crude story. Let's get a quick data check here, Lisa. I mean, it's back down below 6% with the S&P down 6.2%, 183 points.
Yeah, and what Anne-Marie was referring to, a Twitter post by President Trump, good for the consumer, gasoline prices coming down. And that is true on the margins, the idea being that net, when you have lower oil prices, that does give a boon, some extra spending cash to the American consumer. That said, this comes at a time when a lot of people are staying home. They're not traveling as much because of concerns about the spreading coronavirus. So it's a very difficult time to see that benefit play out, given the other pressures. This is part of what's bleeding into the ongoing weakness that we're seeing.
Absolutely. WTI, just a data check on that. We're down about 19%, $33.50 a barrel on WTI crude. This is Bloomberg.
Business.
This one shouldn't take long. Of course, if it had a cover, I might not be bothered. Can't see what's under there. And they'd have chained the back wheel. It would have taken me much longer, especially if the chain's off the ground. Makes it harder to cut. This one doesn't even have a lock on the front. So, in the time I've been talking to you, I've nicked it.
On average, in London, a scooter or motorbike is stolen every hour. Make sure it's not yours. Lock your bike, chain the rear wheel, and cover to make it harder to steal. Lock, chain, cover. The Met Police.
A half-price dream holiday, wouldn't want to miss that. A takeaway for free, wouldn't want to miss that. And 30 gigs data for just £10 a month on Smarty Mobile. You definitely don't want to miss that. Our Smarty SIM comes packed with 30 gigs of data and unlimited calls and texts for just £10 a month on a 1-month plan. That's why Smarty won Best Value SIM-only network in the U-Switch Mobile Awards 2020. Don't miss out. Search Smarty Mobile. Smarty. Simple, honest mobile. Smarty.co.uk.
We've all been in one, but how much do you really know about black cabs? For instance, did you know that a black cab has to be tall enough to accommodate an individual wearing a bowler hat? That's a lot of space for you and your briefcase. Or that Free Now drivers can use the bus lanes, the perfect getaway to make your meeting in time. And with 2-minute central London pickups, you needn't waste time searching for a taxi. Just download the Free Now app today and take the hassle out of getting round London.
Welcome to Costa, the nation's favourite coffee shop. What can I get you?
A flat white, please.
And would you like to
enter the 10 million point Costa Coffee Club giveaway?
Yeah.
And collect points towards free coffees and treats in store.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Registered Coffee Club members only. 18 plus. GB only. Excludes Northern Ireland. Purchase required. 9th of March to 5th of April. The question, what is your favourite branded coffee shop, was asked. See costa.co.uk for full details and T's and C's.
Whatever job you're searching for, you can find it on LinkedIn. First jobs, flexible jobs, work from home on a Friday jobs, advertising jobs, accounting jobs, HR, PR, even ER jobs, Soho jobs, Shoreditch jobs. Keep me away from the central line jobs. Banking jobs, building jobs, never ever boring jobs. Small jobs, big jobs, lunch in Borough Market jobs, or even voiceover jobs, which is how I ended up recording this ad. Search millions of jobs on LinkedIn and find one meant for you.
At Asda, with our great range of beers and cider, it looks like you're hosting. Get 2 packs for just £18 or just £10 each. Like 12 bottles of Corona or 10 cans of Copperberg Cherry. Cracking brands, refreshing prices. Don't compromise. Asda. Save money. Live better. Selected stores subject to availability. Offer ends 18th of March. 330 millilitres each. Drink aware.
World 24 hours a day at Bloomberg.com, on the Bloomberg Business app, and on Quick Take by Bloomberg. This is Bloomberg Radio. This is Bloomberg Markets with Lisa Abramowitz and Paul Sweeney.
Are we on the brink of a more serious downturn?
I've always thought of the municipal bond market as a little bit of a safe haven.
Banks are going to have to start paying their depositors more.
Are we still in that mode where we're buying the dips?
Breaking market news and insight from Bloomberg experts.
Cash, if you're looking at treasury bills, provides a higher return than stocks and bonds here in the U.S.
If your consumer is a woman, you're more likely to be a growth company.
Longer-term interest rates can go down, even with short-term interest rates still going up a little bit.
This is Bloomberg Markets with Lisa Abramowitz and Paul Sweeney on Bloomberg Radio.
Coming up here on Bloomberg Radio, we're really focused on markets today on this historic day with some of the biggest moves ever in history in both bonds and stocks. We're going to be speaking with Christina Hooper, Invesco Chief Global Market Strategist, as well as Lisa Shallett, who is Chief Investment Officer for the Wealth Management Division of Morgan Stanley. Right now, let's get a check of those numbers. Greg Jarrett has that for us. Greg.
Lisa, stocks are now down more than 6.5%. They've been whipsawing back from losses that did top 7% after the open and triggered a trading halt. It's about the oil price war that rattled financial markets and coronavirus. Treasury yields are down, crude's down more than 30%, and credit markets have buckled. Dana Peterson, Citi global economist, tells Bloomberg the forecast for an impending recession is not bright.
Citi's global growth forecast is already in a growth recession. We have 2.5% year-on-year growth for this year. That means that that includes some downgrades that we had from our Asian economists earlier this year, but it does not include further downgrades we've had out of Asia, out of Europe, and also potentially some downgrades from our U.S. economists.
We check the markets every 15 minutes throughout the trading day on Bloomberg Radio. The S&P is now down 6.5%, down 190. The Dow Jones Industrial Average is down 6.6%, down 1,718, and the NASDAQ is down 5.9%, down 505. The 10-year is up 2.3%. West Texas Intermediate Crude is currently down 18% at $33.94 a barrel. COMEX Gold's a little change now at $16.7280 an ounce. The dollar yen 102.31, the euro $1.14.35, and the British pound $1.31.34. That is a Bloomberg Business Flash. Now Bloomberg Markets continues with Lisa and Paul.
Great, Jared. Thank you so much. Bloomberg Markets brought to you by Commonwealth Financial Network. For the 6th straight time, J.D. Power ranks Commonwealth #1 in independent advisor satisfaction among financial investment firms. Visit Commonwealth.com to learn more. Headline just coming across the Bloomberg terminal that President Trump is to hold a meeting on coronavirus economic response. That'll take place on Monday. We'll bring you more of that going forward. Talking about the markets here, we've just heard from Greg Jarrett, still selling off here over 6%. Let's bring in Bloomberg Stocks editor Dave Wilson. Dave, at this time we usually chat about small caps, but let's broaden it out and talk about just the equities overall. We're 90 minutes into this wild trading session. What's jumping out at you?
Well, just the magnitude of the declines. You look at the energy stocks in particular, just looking at the S&P 500 energy index at the moment, trying to put that into some historical context. I mean, you have to go way back. You're now at the point where, we haven't had a drop this big since the index was created back in 1989. So you're looking at maybe the 87 crash. That jumps out. And I do want to just mention what's going on with smaller companies, because it's even worse than what we're seeing with larger ones. You've got the Russell 2000 index down 7.7%.
That's more than a percentage point more than the S&P 500. And the Russell 2000 Energy Index down 19%. Compare that with a 17% drop in its S&P 500 counterpart. I mean, it's just stunning the kind of declines we're seeing in the group.
What do we price again here?
You know, that's a good question. Armageddon, maybe?
Well, no, but is that the case? I mean, given how high valuations had gotten, are we pricing in Armageddon, or are we actually now just starting to price in a recession?
Well, I mean, there's no doubt that people are taking a step back and saying things are getting worse, because let's face it, you know, with oil prices coming down, you would think it would be a net positive for an economy that could use one, but it's not working out that way. In fact, I've seen, I think it might have been UBS, including that it's a net negative, what's happening to oil prices because, you know, of what it means, given the backdrop we have with the effects of the coronavirus and how it's hurt a number of industries already. You know, I was talking about airlines last hour and how, you know, in another scenario, you could see those stocks moving up in response to what's happening with oil prices, because obviously jet fuel costs are one of their biggest expenses. And, you know, with crude coming down, you know, jet fuel's coming down. But if the airlines aren't flying, there goes your benefit.
Yeah, I'm looking at the VIX to get a sense of the volatility in the marketplace today. We're at 58.3 on the VIX. That's up 16 full points there. You know, it wasn't too long ago, several weeks ago, that we were down at 12, 13, 14 on the VIX. So the volatility that's in this market, Dave, is also something. It's not just the magnitude of the points declines, but kind of the volatility that's entered into this market.
Right, and it's sort of been creeping up over the last couple of weeks. I mean, that's the thing. It's almost like, you know, the train wreck has been sort of piling up here, and it's just a matter of when it got to the point when, you know, things would stop crashing, I guess you could say, in terms of where things are headed. So, you know, that really does jump out as well.
It's interesting, as we talk about the Russell 2000, I think about how these companies tend to be more reliant on the high-yield bond market, on the credit markets, than the larger companies do. And that's one reason why some analysts have said the Russell 2000 is underperformed. These are more highly indebted companies and are more vulnerable when there is some sort of economic downturn. And I'm wondering how much that's playing a part, that as we're seeing credit markets crater today, that's sort of giving an extra like oomph to the sell-off that we're seeing in the small caps.
Well, it's no doubt that it's part of the mix, because, you know, there's a Morgan Stanley index that actually tracks the shares of energy companies with high-yield debt ratings. It's down roughly 30% on the day. And you look at the worst performers in the Russell right now, I mean, you've got stocks that are down more than 60%.
Like what?
I'll give you a few names real quick. SM Energy, the ticker there, SM, is down 67%. Callon Petroleum, ticker CPE, down almost 66%. Matador Resources, ticker MTDR, down 64%. I mean, it's just...
Yep. It's interesting when you look at the S&P, we're off about 18% from our high. That was just back on February 19th. So we're close to that. You know, we're past the correction. We're close to that bear market territory. What will you look for, Dave, to sense that maybe getting some, you know, stability in the marketplace? Is it just a couple of up days? Is it, you know, what do you kind of look for?
Well, we had a couple of up days last week, and here we are today. I mean, it really comes down to, you know, when does the situation start changing in a meaningful way? And, you know, you can look at, you know, events as they relate to the coronavirus. I mean, it's still spreading. There's still people dying. So, you know, that's not going to turn on its head right away necessarily. And, you know, oil prices being what they are, I mean, that's going to have a ripple effect that will play out over time. Lord knows what will happen to some of these smaller energy companies, the ones in the shale patch that are, you know, dependent on high yield debt and have to make payments when, you know, that they face a drop in their cash flow because they can't sell their oil or their gas for as much as they could have before. I mean, it's hard to see what kind of turns things here, and you sort of need that at some point.
That's been one of the key questions that reporters and analysts at Bloomberg have been culling the street for all morning and frankly all weekend. And the answer seems to be collectively people are looking for some sort of action on the part of both the Fed as well as the federal government within the U.S. and then some sort of coordinated bank action internationally. Just to give you a sense of this, Dennis Dubashir over at Evercore ISI saying that investors won't focus on any positive signs from a potential recovery in Chinese production to attractive valuations until they have confidence that the U.S. government and Fed will do what it takes to lower tail risks. So
whatever the heck that means.
Exactly.
I mean, given that you had a half-point emergency rate cut out of the Fed last week, and here we are.
Although a lot of people are saying that rate cuts are going to do nothing at a time when the entire curve is below 1% for the first time in history and going lower. Yep. The question is, how do you ease some of the financial stress that you're seeing with the expansion of the repo facility, which we saw today from the New York Federal Reserve, but also targeted lending. And then there comes the fiscal questions, and we are going to perhaps be hearing from President Trump later today on that point. It's going to be an interesting time. We will be bringing to you all the news as we get it. Dave Wilson, Bloomberg Stocks Editor, thank you so much for being with us. Right now, let's check in with Nathan Hager down in our 99.1 studios in Washington, D.C. Nathan.
Well, here's some news now, Lisa. President Trump is due to meet with White House aides later today to discuss potential economic stimulus ideas as the coronavirus concerns continue to batter markets. Sources tell Bloomberg those ideas include a temporary paid sick leave expansion or more help for companies facing disruption from the outbreak. Dr. Anthony Fauci at the National Institute of Allergy and Infectious Diseases puts this one in perspective.
It's not that different than the very early years of the HIV epidemic, of the anthrax attacks, of the concern about the pre-pandemic bird flu. Everything has a little bit of a different twist to it.
As this outbreak continues to unfold, Princeton is joining the list of universities that are shifting to virtual classes. Spain is considering emergency measures after its infection count nearly doubled overnight. And French President Emmanuel Macron is calling for urgent European cooperation as he prepares to unveil his own emergency measures. Democrats in 6 states vote in presidential primaries tomorrow. Michigan is the top prize.
Bernie can win, will win, must win. When Bernie wins, healthcare wins.
The Reverend Jesse Jackson rallied Bernie Sanders supporters yesterday in Grand Rapids, but momentum appears to be on Joe Biden's side still after his Super Tuesday victories. A Detroit Free Press poll released this morning shows the former vice president with a 24-point lead over Sanders in Michigan, though Sanders' campaign says a similar poll showed him 25 points behind Hillary Clinton before he won Michigan in 2016. Global news on air and on Quick Take by Bloomberg, powered by more than 2,700 journalists and analysts in more than 120 countries.
If you promise to cover the latest financial and business news from Asia,
we're talking about social enterprises in Asian countries
with expert analysts who really understand Asia,
aren't you encouraged with respect to U.S.-China trade?
Then you must be us.
Tell us about the trend within this part of the world.
Bloomberg Daybreak Asia.
What sort of fiscal stimulus do you think we'll see?
Tonight at 6 Eastern on Bloomberg Radio, the Bloomberg Business app, and BloombergRadio.com. Bloomberg, the world is listening.
Melissa from Michigan. I work an extra part-time job serving lunch at my child's school, but I still can't afford to put food on our table.
Daniel from California. Choosing whether to pay the rent or pay to fix the car to get to work doesn't leave us with much at all. Now we can't even pay for meals.
Hunger is a story we can end. End it at feedingamerica.org. Brought to you by Feeding America and the Ad Council.
Are you interested in a challenging and exciting career? One where you can be part of solving complex challenges across industries and geographies. Bloomberg's ever-expanding technology, data, news, and media services foster innovation, empower clients, and offer nearly limitless opportunities for career growth. Visit Bloomberg.com/careers today to view our current job opportunities. Bloomberg LP is an equal opportunity employer. The address once again is Bloomberg.com/careers.
My mother was always very active and independent, and she was familiar with her neighborhood. But one day, she stopped at the stop sign for much longer than usual. She wasn't even really sure where she was at.
It's important for you to talk to someone about it. I felt so much better after my son told me, Mom, we'll figure it out.
When something feels different, it could be Alzheimer's. Now is the time to talk. Visit alz.org/ourstories to learn more. A message from the Alzheimer's Association and the Ad Council.
Welcome to Costa, the nation's favourite coffee shop. What can I get you?
A flat white, please.
And would you like to enter the 10 million point Costa Coffee Club giveaway?
Yeah.
And collect points towards free coffees and treats in store.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Registered Coffee Club members only. 18 plus, GB only. Excludes Northern Ireland. Purchase required. 9th of March to 5th of April. The question, what is your favourite branded coffee shop, was asked. See costa.co.uk for full details and T's and C's.
Hey, have you heard? The Mayor of London has launched his latest van scrappage scheme to help tackle London's toxic air. Small businesses or sole traders like me with a polluting van could now get £7,000, which you could use to trade up to a Euro 6 vehicle. And you could get an extra £2,500 towards running costs if you go electric. The scheme is now even easier to qualify for, and it's open to any businesses with up to 50 employees, like mine. So, I'm going to search TfL scrappage to see if I'm eligible and apply. You should do the same. To the Mayor of London and TfL, every journey matters.
Matt Letizia, what did you make of that performance today?
Well, it really was a game of two halves, to be honest, Jeff. Leicester came out in the first half really...
Letiz?
What's up, Jeff?
Run for it!
What the...
Move over, football. Cheltenham coming through. And Sky Bet are on the charge. With money back as actual cash, up to £10 if you lose on the first race of the festival. Sky Bet. That's betting better. Applies to first bet on first race at Cheltenham on losing singles and win part of each way singles only. Money back as cash, free bet stakes excluded, eligibility restrictions, T's and C's apply. 18 plus, begambleaware.org.
This ad is made from 100% recycled commercials. Just like Smart Water's
all new
bottles are made from
100% recycled
plastic.
What's that number again?
100%. Every Smart Water bottle is made using recycled plastic, and because it's still
100%
recyclable, the plastic will be used again
and again.
Smart Water, now in a 100% recycled plastic bottle. Label and cap 100% recyclable, but not made from recycled plastic. Yet. We're working on it.
At Asda, with our great range of beers and cider, it looks like you're hosting. Get 2 packs for just £18 or just £10 each. Like 12 bottles of Corona or 10 cans of Copperberg Cherry. Cracking brands, refreshing prices. Don't compromise. Asda. Save money. Live better. Selected stores subject to availability. Offer ends 18th of March. 330 millilitres each. Drink aware.
Do you go on the same holiday every year? To the same country, in the same hotel, with the same sea view? Visit the same ancient monuments, lay by the same dolphin-shaped pool, meet the same Barrys and Sandras, and wear the same Hawaiian shirt that you'd never wear at home? Then maybe it's time to switch it up, starting with the all-new Vauxhall Corsa, with its bold styling and up to 70 miles per gallon. To switch it up, visit your local Vauxhall dealership or search New Corsa. Official WLTP test figures for comparison purposes only. Real-world figures may vary.
You love TuneIn for live-breaking news from CNN, MSNBC, Fox, CNBC, and more. But when you can't catch your favorite show as it airs, it might just be a click away as a podcast. Search your favorite news station to explore all the on-demand news shows on TuneIn.
Like what you're listening to? Want to make getting back to it easier? Use the favorite button to keep track of the stations and podcasts you love on TuneIn. Just tap or click the heart icon to add it to your favorites. Then find all your go-to audio under the favorites tab. Pretty easy, right?
Breaking news 24 hours a day at Bloomberg.com, the Bloomberg Business app, and on Quick Take by Bloomberg. This is a Bloomberg Business Flash.
Stocks are cratering as investors grapple with the sinking price of oil and the spread of coronavirus. We look at the numbers every 15 minutes throughout the trading day on Bloomberg Radio. S&P is currently down 5.7%, down 169. Dow Jones Industrial Average is down 5.9%, down 1,523. And the NASDAQ is down 5.2%, down 447. The 10-year is up 2.3%. The yield is 0.5192%. West Texas Intermediate's down 17.3% at $34.13 a barrel. COMEX gold is down 0.2% at 16.69 even per ounce. The dollar yen 102.31, the euro $1.14.36, and the British pound $1.31.40. Ford shares fell below $6 for the first time in more than a decade after a Deutsche Bank analyst questioned how ready the manufacturer is for a U.S. auto industry slump. Right now, Ford's down 8% at $5.96 per share. That's a Bloomberg Business Flash. I'm Greg Jarrett.
You're listening to Bloomberg Markets with Lisa Abramowitz and Paul Sweeney on Bloomberg Radio.
Boy, on days like today, when you've got risk assets across the board trading off substantially, some say in a panic mode, it is always good to have our good friend Christina Hooper join us, give us some perspective here. Christina Hooper is Invesco's Chief Global Market Strategist. She joins us here in our Bloomberg Interactive Broker studio. So, Christina, thanks so much for joining. I know it's a busy day for you and dealing with clients. Just help us put into perspective what we've seen, not just in the last week or so, but particularly this morning with the news over the weekend about oil and the coronavirus.
Well, I think of it as a 1-2 punch. Markets had come under significant pressure as a result of the coronavirus outbreak that spread, the concerns about the impact on the economy. And then, of course, we had events evolve in oil markets such that we now have a supply shock. That disagreement between Russia and the rest of OPEC Plus, which then led to the Saudis deciding to add to supply. And so this is a scenario where now we're going to see high yield come under, and we're already seeing high yield come under very significant pressure. The energy sector is coming under very significant pressure. And so that is really impacting the environment. And I think what in general we're seeing is a lack of confidence in markets because there is not a lot of certainty about whether or not we're going to get an appropriate response from governments. To me, this is what is at the heart of this issue, is that what we've seen really since the global financial crisis is strong monetary response and a lackluster fiscal response. And now it's clear that we need a fiscal response. But I think in the memories of many investors is the fact that TARP narrowly passed, that we didn't get much in the way of fiscal stimulus, even though that's what we really need to help companies get through the next few months.
If we don't get, to use your words, an appropriate fiscal response within the next few weeks, say even 2 months, what will the fallout be like?
Well, it will elongate an economic downturn. I mean, really, we're at essentially a decision point where we could go in a variety of different directions, depending upon certainly the lifespan of the outbreak, but more importantly, the response to it, the healthcare response to it, the fiscal response to it, and the monetary policy response to it. And so my expectation, my hope is that we get enough of a fiscal response, but if we don't, it elongates the downturn. And it, in many ways, it could worsen that downturn over time. We can look to China as a model of how to do it right. China actually provided significant stimulus, not just monetary, but fiscal. We were hearing from U.S. companies that were saying they were getting subsidized loans from China to continue to pay employees even though they weren't coming to work. That's the kind of thing we need in this environment to really get through, because we know that there are a lot of Americans that are very vulnerable, that don't have any significant level of emergency savings. That's not really a concern when things are going well, but it is a concern when things are starting to go poorly and they might actually see hourly wages cut because of all the cancellations that we're seeing, all the change in plans, all the disruption being caused by the outbreak.
It's interesting. There's a story on the Bloomberg right now that President Trump's aides are actually drafting economic steps to fight the virus fallout. So maybe we'll even get some news on that potentially today. So we'll have to see how that plays in. So, Christina, as you think about this, what's the correct analysis to do? Is it to kind of look at valuation, try to find names that you know, the business models that you feel are strong, and if you find good valuation points, to maybe put some money to work?
Absolutely. I think this is time to be really writing a list and referring to that list as you watch the carnage in markets, because there are a lot of great names that get beaten down in the short run, because as we know, when there's blood in the water, there's just insanity in the minds of investors. And stocks might be a voting machine in the short run, but over the longer run, they are a weighing machine. And so there are definitely opportunities out there that are being created by a mispricing of asset classes. I think of this as the real March Madness.
All right. One question that I have is, how easy is it to execute at those prices? In other words, how fluid is the financial system right now? We're hearing anecdotally of some difficulties with respect to executing trades.
Well, I think that for the most part, what I've heard is that trades have gone through smoothly. I think it depends on the volume, but investors don't need to pile on in all at once. Have a clear head about buying as well as selling, but have that list, refer to it, and see the opportunities created by carnage. It's very hard to call a bottom. I know Mark Haynes famously did that a while back on this anniversary 12 years ago, but it's very hard to do that, but you know when things are getting oversold, and so you can begin to create entry points.
Right now, a lot of the selling action really has stemmed from institutional investors. We haven't seen the mass flight when it comes to retailers. Just real quickly, how concerned are you about that?
I'm not too concerned at this point, because certainly for those investors that are advised, they're likely to maintain exposure. I think that our industry has done a better and better job of really stressing the importance of taking a long-term view. That for so many, for example, the fourth quarter of 2018 was a blip. Now, it was very disappointing to get those statements, but at the end of the day, it was quickly erased.
Christina Hooper, wonderful having you here with us. Thank you so much, and best of luck through this period. Christina Hooper is Invesco Chief Global Market Strategist, joining us here in our interactive broker studio as we see some of the biggest moves, frankly, in history throughout markets. Right now, we see equities retracing some of their prior losses, with the S&P now down 5.4%. This is Bloomberg.
This is a Bloomberg Money Minute. Investors 3 weeks ago were doubling down on how long the market rally was going to be. Now they're being forced to unwind bets with a fury that's rarely ever seen. The Dow plunging 1,700 points this session. One catalyst for today's turmoil comes from the oil patch, where an all-out price war is breaking out between Saudi Arabia and Russia. A collapse of the OPEC alliance has the Saudi kingdom making the deepest price cuts in at least 20 years. Russia responding with an increase in production, oil at $34 a barrel. The Trump administration is said to be drafting economic steps to fight the effects of the coronavirus. A group worked on the proposal throughout the weekend. And there are new questions about the Boeing 737 MAX. The FAA told Boeing wiring on the MAX doesn't meet legal standards because of the threat of a hazardous short circuit. It could mean more expensive repairs and could delay getting the MAX back in the air. Courtney Donahoe, Bloomberg Radio.
Listen, as a hiring manager, I've got to tell you, the best job candidate isn't always the typical candidate. Sometimes they're a grad of life.
Meet the grads of life. Young adults of unique determination and experience. An ideal fit for your company in an entry-level position, internship, or mentorship. They might not have every qualification you typically look for, but they're exactly who your company needs.
Sometimes the best candidates aren't the ones you're used to.
Go to gradsoflife.org to learn how to find, cultivate, and train this great pool of untapped talent. Brought to you by the Ad Council and gradsoflife.org.
Are you interested in a challenging and exciting career? One where you can be part of solving complex challenges across industries and geographies. Bloomberg's ever-expanding technology, data, news, and media services foster innovation, empower clients, and offer nearly limitless opportunities for career growth. Visit Bloomberg.com/careers today to view our current job opportunities. Bloomberg LP is an equal opportunity employer. The address once again is Bloomberg.com/careers.
Hey, have you heard? The Mayor of London has launched his latest van scrappage scheme to help tackle London's toxic air. Small businesses or sole traders like me with a polluting van could now get £7,000, which you could use to trade up to a Euro 6 vehicle. And you could get an extra £2,500 towards running costs if you go electric. The scheme is now even easier to qualify for, and it's open to any businesses with up to 50 employees, like mine. So, I'm going to search TfL scrappage to see if I'm eligible and apply. You should do the same. To the Mayor of London and TfL, every journey matters.
Despite never having used them, Alison Peartree was not initially a fan of purple bricks.
Because I heard from my uncle's cousin's neighbour's dog walker they don't have proper estate agents.
But Alison's uncle's cousin's neighbour's dog walker was wrong. Purple bricks have experienced local agents ready to sell your home.
Turns out Martin from Purple Bricks was very knowledgeable. And he didn't charge commission. I've even recommended him to my sister's boyfriend's auntie's hairdresser, Sharon.
Purple Bricks. Book your free valuation today.
Fixed fee payable on instruction or after 10 months. Viewing service cost extra.
Shh. Whisper it. This LG Turbo Wash with AI Direct Drive will soon be your strong, silent hero. One of the UK's quietest and quickest washing machines, it uses a jet spray to cut your washing time to under an hour. More convenience, less hassle. And with all LG appliances, you can save up to £100 when you trade in your old one. Heroes of the home at Curry's PC World. Full terms at currys.co.uk.
Take the next left, take a right, and you've arrived at your Vauxhall retailer, where you'll find the all-new Vauxhall Corsa. Test drive now and you can take advantage of a £500 deposit contribution with 4.9% APR representative. Book your test drive of the all-new Corsa now. Vauxhall. New rules Britannia. £500 allowance provided as deposit contribution on qualifying new Vauxhalls. Conditional sale and personal contract purchase only. Subject to status, T's and C's, 18 plus Vauxhall Finance. Registered by 2nd of April 2020. Search Vauxhall Test Drive.
Are you curious what others are listening to on TuneIn? Head to the trending section under Browse to see the most popular stations and podcasts among TuneIn listeners right now. Check it out. You might just discover something new for yourself.
When you're not listening to your team, take it to the end zone, the rim, or the net. Keep up with the biggest moments in sports by following TuneIn on social media.
Cook into the end zone for the touchdown.
From reminders of the live top games to tips of the best sports stations and podcasts.
Welcome to Undisputed. We are live from Los Angeles. I'm Jenny Taft here with Skip Bayless.
Follow at TuneIn on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram to get the most out of TuneIn. The puck drops. 12 players face off to win. The suspense is pure torture, but you wouldn't miss this for the world. TuneIn brings you every minute of the NHL season. Listen live to hockey when it matters most on TuneIn.
The government has coordinated and streamlined its coronavirus messaging, but is it the right message?
What's really necessary is for the people in the government who don't know the details to stop telling us things like there will be a vaccine in 1 year. Stop it. That's not helpful.
Making sense of the noise and the silence on this week's On the Media from WNYC. Listen to the On the Media podcast from WNYC Studios on TuneIn today.
At every step, from onboarding to wealth planning, to performance analysis and more. And because we're part of BNY Mellon, you'll benefit from more than 230 years of strength and stability. At Pershing, we're personally invested in your success.
Visit Pershing.com to learn more about Pershing's integrated wealth experience. Pershing LLC and Pershing Advisor Solutions LLC are both members of FINRA and SIPC.
Adopt US Kids presents What to Expect When You're Expecting a Teenager. Learning the lingo.
Jelly. Jelly adjective. Jelly is a shorter, better way to say jealous. As in, Chloe, I am like so jelly of your unicorn phone case.
You don't have to speak teen to be a perfect parent. Thousands of teens in foster care will love you just the same. Visit adoptuskids.org, brought to you by the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services, Adopt US Kids, and the Ad Council.
Sometimes the simplest method is the best one.
I think even I could figure it out today.
Balance of Power with David Weston.
You had a high estimate. It beat your high estimate.
Weekdays at noon Eastern on Bloomberg Radio. Bloomberg, the world is listening. Broadcasting live from the Bloomberg Interactive Brokers Studio in New York. Bloomberg 1130 to Washington, D.C. Bloomberg 99.1 to Boston. Bloomberg 106.1 to San Francisco. Bloomberg 960 to the country. Sirius XM Channel 119. And around the globe, the Bloomberg Business app and BloombergRadio.com. This is Bloomberg Markets.
Folks, Want to stick around for the rest of this hour? Let me tell you, we're going to finish very strong. Lisa Shallett, Chief Investment Officer, Wealth Management at Morgan Stanley. She's in our Bloomberg Interactive Broker studio. We're going to get her thoughts on the markets today. Plus, Elena Shuliatyeva, Senior U.S. Economist with strong views on how the coronavirus will impact the U.S. economy going forward. We'll have her in studio as well. But first, let's go to Greg Jarrett for Bloomberg News for a Bloomberg Business Flash. Greg.
Paul, at one point, stocks plunged more than 5%, whipsawing back and forth from losses that topped 7% and triggered the trading halt we all experienced right after the open. There's a full-blown oil price wars rattling financial markets, which are already pretty nervous because of coronavirus. Treasury yields are down, crude's down more than 30% at one point, and credit markets have buckled. We check the markets every 15 minutes throughout the trading day here on Bloomberg Radio. The S&P 500 is currently down 5.7%, down 170. The Dow's down 5.9%, down 1,528, and the NASDAQ is down 5.3%, down 458. The 10-year is up over 2% with a yield of 0.5407. And Isabel Mateo-Silago at BlackRock tells Bloomberg that makes for an extreme situation for fixed income investors.
This puts enormous pressure on these institutions to try and preserve the kind of level of yields that they've been accustomed to or that they aspire to. And it's, increasingly pushing them into new asset classes, alternative assets, in some cases equity. But of course, in a market like this, nobody really has huge risk appetite. So it's a huge conundrum for efficient investors and fixed income investors generally.
West Texas Intermediate crude is now down 7.5% at $33.80 a barrel. COMEX gold is down 0.1% at $16.70.90 an ounce. The dollar yen 102.29. The euro $1.14.21, and the British pound $1.31.36. That's a Bloomberg Business Flash. I'm Greg Jarrett.
You're listening to Bloomberg Markets with Lisa Abramowitz and Paul Sweeney on Bloomberg Radio.
How many shocks does it take before the market breaks? That is the question, and we got an answer today. Whether it comes to the coronavirus spreading and stirring concerns about a global recession, plus the fact that oil prices are plunging, the answer is ugly. Joining us to discuss is Lisa Shallett, Chief Investment Officer for Morgan Stanley Wealth Management. And as we speak, we have the coronavirus narrative evolving, with now the Port Authority Executive Director being diagnosed of having coronavirus after visiting airports in New York and New Jersey. Lisa, what are you looking at to determine when to even get involved and start trading in this market?
Look, so there's, I think, a set of things that we need to consider. The first is that the narrative between where we were on Friday and where we are today has meaningfully changed. And I think the single thing that people need to recognize is that despite the roller coaster volatility of last week, the reality is that at the end of the week, the S&P 500 actually ended the week up about 0.6%. And so, we had a lot of roller coaster movement, but we didn't go very far. The events over the weekend have now taken this from a coronavirus scare that creates the likelihood of a 1 to 2 to maybe 3/4 recession. It really multiplies it with what we've seen with the actions around OPEC today, because it takes this mini demand supply slowdown and turns it into a full-blown recession scenario where the credit market is really implicated in a big way. And that's really the importance of oil here. And so I think that's what's really different. And so what we need to see are kind of two things. Number one, we need to continue to watch coronavirus and to see if the trajectories in the other developed countries follows what we've now seen in China and Korea, which is kind of this 4 to 6 week peak to from an initial announcements acceleration to a peak in new cases, and then secondarily we need to see some stabilization in the credit markets, particularly as linked to oil finding its supply demand balance for the minute.
So what do you make of, some people are saying, is today capitulation? I don't even know how to really define that. Maybe it's a volume, a price agreement kind of thing. How are you viewing today's trading, which was, again, it feels different than even what we experienced last week?
Yeah, so to me, this is not capitulation, because it's typically you get capitulation when there's a narrative in the market and folks lean against that narrative until the last set of folks buy in, and then you have quote unquote capitulation, and everyone who needed to discount reality has discounted reality. This was completely new information that we're seeing global markets trade on as we open from the events at OPEC over the weekend. And as I said, that really transforms the risks from a 2 to 3 quarter mini slowdown, mini recession to something that could really morph into a material deterioration in credit markets over a long period of time, and as we saw in 2016.
And this definitely is what we're seeing right now, which is a repricing across the board in credit. And there is a question of how orderly this will be, or disorderly if there are mass redemptions. This is something we're going to be watching going forward. But what happened to the narrative that low rates makes that extra spread attractive, right? I mean, here we are with benchmark rates from governments in the developed world, all below 1%. Heading below zero in many countries. Why doesn't credit get a boost from that?
Yeah, so, we began to write about this about 10 days ago, that we felt that the Treasury markets and the relationships with equities and other asset classes and the equity risk premium were really at a turning point. And that is, we had spent a lot of time during this cycle with people making the argument that lower and lower rates and lower for longer were really good for multiples, good for spreads. I think that with the collapse, the radical collapse in rates, indicating a true fear of growth prospects, a true fear of deflation, you really are in a situation now where lower and lower rates are actually quite scary, both for growth assets and for credit.
Lisa Shallett, wonderful having you here with us. Thank you for being here.
Thank you.
Lisa Shallett is Chief Investment Officer for Morgan Stanley Wealth Management, joining us here in our Interactive Broker Studios, talking about, honestly, something I think is going to be increasingly fascinating, this idea that low rates, which for more than a decade were viewed as justification for the high valuations of stocks and credit, now being the opposite.
Yeah, and that kind of brings my argument that I've been making a long time. But just when you look at Germany and the negative rates, that's not a good thing. I don't know why people, it's not a good sign for the economy, and I don't think it necessarily boosts economic activity.
Well, talking about Germany, just breaking, Germany is confirming the first death from coronavirus, this coming from DPA, but just as the ongoing narrative continues of the coronavirus spreading and wreaking incredible havoc, in addition to the oil prices. Right now, let's get the view from Washington, D.C. Nathan Hager there with World and National Headlines. Nathan.
Yeah, not just DPA reporting that latest headline out of Germany, Lisa. We also saw the Bild newspaper out of Germany saying that the country has seen its first coronavirus death. The head of the Port Authority of New York and New Jersey is among the latest confirmed U.S. cases of the COVID-19 strain. Governor Andrew Cuomo says Rick Cotton tested positive after visiting airports and other Port Authority facilities. He is now under home quarantine. President Trump plans to meet with White House aides this afternoon to discuss economic stimulus measures to stem the coronavirus fallout. Bloomberg's Amy Morris reports on what they're considering.
Published reports show a man who later tested positive for COVID-19 had stayed in a home with 3 other people, and those 3 have all tested negative, but one of them works at School Without Walls High School, and that employee is now quarantined. The school district has hired a contractor to deep clean the school yesterday. The school will be cleaned again today before students and staff can return. The man who tested positive is being treated at a hospital in Maryland. Amy Morris, Bloomberg 99.1 and 105.7 FM, HD2.
Joe Biden is racking up endorsements as the Democratic presidential race heads into mini Tuesday.
I have a lot of faith in Joe Biden that he is the leader
that can not only beat Donald Trump and bring the necessary coalitions together to do it, but can govern in a way to bring honor back to that office.
New Jersey Senator Cory Booker made that announcement on CBS this morning. He will join Biden and another former presidential rival, Kamala Harris, at a rally in Detroit tonight. A Detroit Free Press poll out this morning shows Biden leading Bernie Sanders in Michigan by 26 points. Global news on air and on Quick Take by Bloomberg, powered by more than 2,700 journalists and analysts in more than 120 countries.
Message and data rates may apply. T&C and privacy terms can be found at babbel.com/terms. Please don't text and drive.
Have you wanted to speak a new language, but you thought it'd be too hard or take too much time? Then try Babbel for free by texting EXPLORE to 64,000. In just 15 minutes a day, you'll be on your way to speaking a new language in just a few weeks. And right now, you can try Babbel for free. Babbel starts out teaching you words and phrases by matching them with pictures. You won't believe how easy the interactive program is. Soon the sentences get a little bigger, and before you know it, you're having simulated conversations voiced by native speakers. And because Babbel is crafted by language experts and uses the spaced repetition method, in just 10 to 15 minutes a day, you'll be speaking the language of your choice with real confidence. With Babbel, you can speak a language. Just text EXPLORE to 64,000 and start your first lesson in the language of your choice for free. Download the Babbel app or text EXPLORE to 64,000 and try it for free. Text EXPLORE to 64,000.
Hey y'all, Jeff Foxworthy here. Now, if you've ever found yourself repeating the same thing over and over for 75 years, you might be Smokey Bear.
Only you can prevent wildfires.
That's why I'm filling in for Smokey to switch things up, because there's a lot more to say. And I should know because my grandfather was a firefighter. And one of the things he taught me is that the people that love the outdoors the most are often the ones accidentally starting wildfires, which means always BYOB. No, bring your own bucket to the campfire. And be extra careful with things like burning yard trimmings. Don't just walk away, or chances are you might be starting a wildfire. So for the love of the outdoors, go to SmokeyBear.com to learn more about wildfire prevention. Brought to you by the U.S. Forest Service, your state forester, and the Ad Council.
Hey, have you heard? The Mayor of London has launched his latest van scrappage scheme to help tackle London's toxic air. Small businesses or sole traders like me with a polluting van could now get £7,000, which you could use to trade up to a Euro 6 vehicle. And you could get an extra £2,500 towards running costs if you go electric. The scheme is now even easier to qualify for, and it's open to any businesses with up to 50 employees, like mine. So, I'm going to search TfL Scrappage to see if I'm eligible and apply. You should do the same. To the Mayor of London and TfL, every journey matters.
This ad is made from 100% recycled commercials, just like Smart Water's.
Oh, new!
Bottles are made from
100% recycled
plastic.
What's that number again?
100%. Every Smart Water bottle is made using recycled plastic, and because it's still
100%
recyclable, the plastic will be used again
and again.
Smart Water, now in a 100% recycled plastic bottle. Label and cap 100% recyclable, but not made from recycled plastic. Yet. We're working on it.
From barbers to dog groomers, at Starling Bank, we'll help you keep your business off the ground. With no monthly fees to weigh you down. Your business is ready for takeoff. Starling Bank. Helping business fly.
Petrol or electric? Why choose petrol and electric? Discover the BMW plug-in hybrid and electric range. 14th to the 21st of March. Visit your BMW retailer. Sometimes electric, always BMW. Participating retailers only.
It's a new day. Grab the bull by the horns of ambition. There's two yous in future. Which do you want to be?
Or leave the motivation to vitality.
With our health insurance, you could get the Apple Watch Series 5 to keep yourself on track from just £99 up front with nothing more to pay if you stay active. Search Vitality Health. Life's better with Vitality. Upfront payment varies starting from £99. 18 plus selected models only. 24-month credit agreement, variable direct debit. Available on certain Vitality plans. Minimum premiums, terms and exclusions apply. You love TuneIn for live breaking news from CNN, MSNBC, Fox, CNBC, and more. But when you can't catch your favorite show as it airs, it might just be a click away as a podcast. Search your favorite news station to explore all the on-demand news shows on TuneIn.
The puck drops. 12 players face off to win. The suspense is pure torture, but you wouldn't miss this for the world. TuneIn brings you every minute of the NHL season. Listen live to hockey when it matters most on TuneIn.
Markets, headlines, and breaking news 24 hours a day at Bloomberg.com, the Bloomberg Business app, and on Quick Take by Bloomberg. This is a Bloomberg Business Flash.
Bit of a pullback from earlier lows, but the S&P is now down close to 18% from its February 19 all-time high. This threatens to end the record-long bull market that began 11 years ago today. Happy anniversary. New York Stock Exchange circuit breakers halted trading for 15 minutes at 9:34 a.m. Wall Street time in a move designed to limit panic. What's going on now? We check the markets every 15 minutes of the trading day on Bloomberg Radio. S&P 500 is down 4.6%, down 138. The Dow Jones Industrial Average is down 4.7%, down 1,220. And the NASDAQ is down 4.25%, down 364. The 10-year is up 1.7% with a yield of 0.58%. West Texas Intermediate crude is down about 18% now at $33.85 a barrel, with COMEX gold down 0.2% at $16.69.20 per ounce. The dollar yen 102.54, the euro $1.14.16, and the British pound $1.31.34. You've heard the reports on price gouging on items like hand sanitizer. New York has a fix for that. The governor, Andrew Cuomo, says the state now is making its own hand sanitizer, NYS Clean, to safeguard against price gouging. That is a Bloomberg Business Flash. I'm Greg Jarrett.
This is Bloomberg Markets with Lisa Abramowitz and Paul Sweeney on Bloomberg Radio.
Bloomberg Markets is brought to you by Witham, a forward-thinking, technology-driven advisory and accounting firm, helping clients be in a position of strength in today's modern business landscape. Visit Witham.com to learn more. All right, so what do we have today? We have a coronavirus spreading. That is obviously bad for global demand. We have energy prices plunging. Presumably, that's good for those of us as we get to the gas station to fill up our tank. But to help us kind of tie it all together, to get a sense of what the near-term and intermediate-term economic outlook for the U.S. is, we welcome our good friend Yelena Shaletiva, senior U.S. economist for Bloomberg Economics, joining us here in our Bloomberg Interactive Broker studio. So, Yelena, kind of digesting everything that we've learned over the past couple of days, maybe even the past couple of weeks, where is Bloomberg Economics now on its outlook for 2020? And number two, kind of where's your recession call, if you have one?
So we actually just downgraded, surprise, surprise, our forecast for economic growth for 2020 by half a percentage point for the year as a whole. We are at 1.6% in terms of Q4 over Q4. We think that the economy will be able to avoid recession, but we are getting very close to that goal. So this is our baseline scenario, that we will avoid recession by a small margin, but if slowdown in growth, which we expect the bulk of it will come in the second quarter of the year, if that lingers, the economy will not be able to sustain it, and we will slip right into the recession.
So traditionally, when you get a drop in oil prices, that is a benefit to the consumer. How much will that be a boost this time around?
That's a great question, and we've been thinking about it. And yes, you're right. Ordinarily, it's a good thing, but consumers will not be willing to spend this time around. So in that sense, a good indicator will be the University of Michigan index of consumer sentiment that is coming out at the end of the week. This will show the degree to which consumers will probably retrench. Services, you cannot really help that much with lower oil prices. Obviously, low interest rates and low gasoline will help consumers eventually, but when the scare is behind us. So for now, we just need the Fed to basically ensure the market participants, ensure consumers that things are under control, and once it all clears, they will be able to come back, and some pent-up demand will lift economic growth.
So, Elena, in your base case economic outlook for Bloomberg Economics, to what extent do you have a fiscal stimulus from the U.S. President Trump? There's a story out on the Bloomberg now, Trump's aides drafting economic steps to fight the virus fallout. How critical is that to be effective?
It is absolutely critical. So a coordinated response from health, fiscal, and monetary authorities is actually required for us to get to our base case scenario. So it's not about some targeted actions that Larry Kudlow was talking about in a Bloomberg interview last Friday. It requires a massive, big fiscal stimulus to stop the bleeding in the markets, I would say.
What happens if we don't get that in the near term?
Well, I think the Fed will get to the zero low bound. They will initiate QE, and they are already looking at all sorts of lending, borrowing programs that were in place during the financial crisis. So now the focus shifts to whether it will be a credit crisis. So looking at the FCON function on the Bloomberg Terminal, financial conditions index at the tightest level since actually the Great Recession right now. So the Fed will need to ensure that small, all-size companies of all sizes get the money flowing in the system. So I think we will see more from the Fed, but if the fiscal authorities don't respond, that will be relatively bad.
So how important is it on a monetary basis for this to be a global coordinated effort as opposed to maybe not so coordinated?
I mean, it depends on what you want to coordinate. You cannot really coordinate that much the policy rate because everybody's at a different stage in that sense. But I think if you engage dollar swap lines and other things that central banks can coordinate, that's a great thing. So you just need to make sure you need to say that it's all in place. The Fed is there, other central banks are there, and they will continue to coordinate. But unfortunately, there's a limit to what monetary authorities can do.
I'm just looking at that FCON function, and I'm just looking at how much it's fallen off a cliff, the financial conditions index that Bloomberg has. Yelena, can you just give us a sense of what that means in real terms?
So that's kind of a self-fulfilling prophecy. Markets see this, and it's getting even worse. That also means that we might see some problems with smaller companies getting access to credit, and that could exacerbate declines. So in our baseline scenario, we see that business investment will get crunched, and also consumer spending shrinks. But if you add to that an oil shock that we were observing today, we can see further declines in business investment, namely structures. I think the structures component of GDP will get decimated. So if we continue to see oil prices falling further.
Yelena Shulyetyeva, thank you so much for being with us. Yelena will be covering this all, I'm sure, in the weeks and months ahead in close focus. Yelena Shulyetyeva, senior U.S. economist with Bloomberg Economics, joining us here in our interactive broker studios just to get you a sense of the market action. The weight to the tape, a little bit less weighty, although still very heavy right now. We're seeing the S&P down 4.8%. Remember, it had been down at one point as much as 7%. NASDAQ down 4.3%, and the Dow down 5%. Meanwhile, in the bond market, all of the entire yield curve, we're talking 30 years through 1 month treasuries, all below 1% as people traders pricing in basically the Fed going to the zero lower bound within months.
Although all of those, the Treasury market off the lows of the day, certainly, but still, you're right, all below 1% for the first time on it. So actually the 30 are just right at 1% right now.
Yeah, right now. Coming up, we have more. Stick with it on Bloomberg Radio.
In addition to Bloomberg Radio, you can catch the latest news and biggest newsmakers on Bloomberg Television. Look for us on DirecTV Channel 353 or check your local listings. That saying, success breeds success, it's true.
Are we seeing any improvement?
Carol Massar and Jason Kelly.
How would you describe your outlook?
Weekday afternoons at 2 Eastern on Bloomberg Radio. Bloomberg Business Week, now live on YouTube.
With the Bloomberg Small Business Report, I'm John Tucker, brought to you by Dell Small Business. President Trump's economic advisor, Larry Kudlow, says the administration is worried about small businesses as they deal with the fallout from coronavirus. As far as an immediate policy response,
stay tuned. Stay with us. We may have more to say about this.
Kudlow tells Bloomberg, in his words, we need to do this when the actual facts come in.
We're looking for targeted measures that will do the most good in a short period of time.
This one shouldn't take long. Of course, if it had a cover, I might not be bothered. Can't see what's under there. And then they'd have chained the back wheel. It would have taken me much longer, especially if the chain's off the ground. Makes it harder to cut. This one doesn't even have a lock on the front. So, in the time I've been talking to you, I've nicked it.
On average, in London, a scooter or motorbike is stolen every hour. Make sure it's not yours. Lock your bike, chain the rear wheel, and cover to make it harder to steal. Lock, chain, cover. The Met Police.
Despite never having used them, Alison Peartree was not initially a fan of purple bricks.
Because I heard from my uncle's cousin's neighbour's dog walker they don't have proper estate agents.
But Alison's uncle's cousin's neighbour's dog walker was wrong. Purple bricks have experienced local agents ready to sell your home.
Turns out Martin from Purple Bricks was very knowledgeable. And he didn't charge commission. I've even recommended him to my sister's boyfriend's auntie's hairdresser, Sharon.
Purple Bricks. Book your free valuation today.
Fixed fee payable on instruction or after 10 months. Viewing service cost extra.
You love TuneIn for live breaking news from CNN, MSNBC, Fox, CNBC, and more. But when you can't catch your favorite show as it airs, it might just be a click away as a podcast. Search your favorite news station to explore all the on-demand news shows on TuneIn.
The puck drops. 12 players face off to win. The suspense is pure torture, but you wouldn't miss this for the world. TuneIn brings you every minute of the NHL season. Listen live to hockey when it matters most on TuneIn.
Financial capital of the world, 24 hours a day at Bloomberg.com, on the Bloomberg Business app, and on Quick Take by Bloomberg. This is Bloomberg Radio. Markets, headlines, and breaking news 24 hours a day at Bloomberg.com, the Bloomberg Business app, and on Quick Take by Bloomberg. This is a Bloomberg Business Flash. This is Balance of Power.
We have the strongest economy by far in the world.
We need an economy that works for everybody.
I am the one who has the broadest coalition.
Where the world of politics meets the world of business.
They've got the money they need to run a very competitive race.
These lawyers brought the case, and in my view, they should be sanctioned. We want certainty in the markets. We want certainty in our trading relationships.
The administration is trying to create a new divided world.
Balance of Power with David Weston on Bloomberg Radio.
Markets react with force to the coronavirus spread. Italy quarantines a quarter of the country, and federal authorities draft measures for fiscal stimulus. From the Bloomberg Interactive Broker Studio, welcome to the second hour of Balance of Power. It may have taken some time, but the entire world is reacting to the spread of the coronavirus, with markets reacting violently today, Italy shutting down the entire north of the country, and policymakers scrambling to catch up, or at least mitigate the damage. much. Welcome now, Ed Mills. He's Raymond James Washington Policy Analyst. So, Ed, thank you so much for joining us. Give us a sense about the government response, and let's start actually with the public health response before we get to the monetary and fiscal.
Yeah, so I think the public health response is finally, in my opinion, really getting ratcheted up. I think there was some opportunities missed, but right now, as of today, Congress has passed an $8.3 billion supplemental. You have testing that is being expanded, having private companies coming in to expand that testing capabilities, a lot more of the monitoring going on. I think we are still probably several weeks behind where I would want to see it today, but certainly on the public health side, the United States has had a tradition of being the world leader in public health, and I hope that now, once things are fully activated, they have that opportunity to shine.
The world leader, but as I understand it, one of the key issues is not overwhelming the system. Even though we've got a really good system, you can't have too many people coming in at the same time. We just don't have, for example, the ICU beds available for them. Do we have an accurate read on how many people are being tested at this point? Because I heard a number from Saturday, it was like 6,000.
Yeah, the answer is no, and the answer is that we do not have enough test kits fully available. We are not fully testing everyone that needs to be tested. My hope is that that changes sooner rather than later. But to your question about capacity, that is one of the big debates out there as we speak right now. One of the concerns that kind of the American Hospital Association, in their best guess on epidemiology of this, has laid out is that if this spreads quickly, the hospitals become overrun very quickly. And so one of the balancing acts that the kind of public health officials are going to have is, do we have more closures of schools, cancellations of events, more kind of self-quarantining to go on, trying to slow down the spread of this, trying to prevent that system from being overwhelmed? That seems like a very reasonable potential government response, especially on the state and local level. But that comes with it a greater than anticipated economic response.
Well, exactly.
So
there's the trade-off.
What leaders have to do, the trade-off that's going to be debated here over the next coming days, weeks, and months is that trade-off between healthcare and economics. And clearly, we need to side on the side of healthcare.
Well, and Ed, on that question, who gets to make the trade-off? As we decide to, for example, Scarsdale schools were shut down now in Westchester County. That's a local decision, I believe. To what extent does the federal government weigh in on how aggressive we should be on the quarantining in order to slow down the disease so we don't overwhelm the system? But on the other hand, as you say, that can really hit the economy and businesses.
Yeah, near and medium term, the vast majority of these decisions are going to be made at the state and local level. And that is going to be based upon the testing that comes back with where the virus is present and where we don't have the capacity to test where we need to be testing.
So Ed, turn from, on the one hand, the public health response, a government, both federal and local response, as you suggest, to the possible response of stimulating the economy, try to take some of the sting out of all those closures, all that quarantining. The Fed cut the interest rates by 50 basis points, and the markets didn't seem to like it, and they basically said, just keep going. We want to get to zero. What about on the fiscal side? We're told President Trump is on his way back to the White House this afternoon. He's going to be reviewing plans. What needs to be done there? What should be done?
So I've been spending the last number of days reaching out to individuals, trying to get a sense as to where we are, what we should do. What I consistently get back in the response is, yes, we're just starting to think about that. So from my perspective, D.C. here is going to lag a bit before we have an answer to that question. The idea that the White House is meeting is good, but it arguably should have happened before now. There's been a bit of an issue related to messaging. You can't come out and propose a massive fiscal stimulus package and also have the messaging that has come out of the White House that this should be limited in nature. So the other issue is, if we do have a fiscal stimulus package, because we don't know the exact economic impact just yet, policymakers are not quite sure how to respond. Is it best to do a payroll tax cut? Well, if individuals are not working, they're not getting a paycheck, that wouldn't have an impact. What happens to the gig economy, especially as a lot of travel and kind of wait staff, things that are most likely to be impacted are folks that are not on general salaries. So from my perspective, we're still several weeks away from having DC having that package put together, and all attention really is on the Fed and what the Fed can do near and medium term from the administration and congressional perspective.
Boy, that's pretty sobering if it's really several weeks. I mean, do you have a sense whether the basic question of, I'll compare two things that are incomparable, a bazooka or a scalpel are required? Because we heard Larry Kudlow on Friday saying it's going to be micro-targeted, which should not be, for example, a payroll tax reduction. Do we have a sense of where the White House is likely to come in on that basic question? Is it broad or is it narrow?
They don't know right now, I think, is the kind of answer to that question, and they're discussing that as we speak. They're going to present to the president later today, and it's going to be incumbent upon this administration to signal exactly what they want. One idea that has floated around out there that I think is going to be embraced sooner rather than later is the idea of a line of credit. Should we pass that bazooka that is kind of only used as the economic impact is felt? So to the extent that this abates faster than currently projected, some of that line of credit gets reined in. But if this expands and we need that opportunity, that line of credit gets spent. Democrats will want that line of credit to be spent on state and local governments who could see a real drop in receipts from taxes if people are not going out and spending. They'll want it to cover sick days. They'll also want it to cover any of the health care insurance. So that line of credit is, I think, one of the things that I am most focused on right now as the way of kind of having a measured response that could scale up or scale down based upon the facts.
And Ed, listening to you, I had thought there was an issue because Congress is in session, as I understand it, this week, not next. But the way you describe it, there's not that big a rush because they're not going to have their plan figured out until Congress is back together.
Yeah, and in Congress, if need be, can come back. We'll also be watching. There are several members of Congress who are in self-containment. These are individuals who have a lot of contact with the public. Making sure that there is a plan to ensure that they are voting will be a part of this as well.
Do we have any sense within the executive branch the number of people who are working from home or are self-quarantined?
Not yet. I have heard from individuals that work at various agencies that this week some of the agencies will be testing out work from home periods. Right now there has been no blanket orders, but I think this week is a testing week just in case the federal government gets to a point where they need that. The federal government historically has been a leader in telework anyways, so we're probably from a federal government perspective a little bit further along than a lot of the private sector on telecommuting.
Fascinating. Okay, really appreciate you being with us today, Ed. That is Ed Mills. He's of Raymond James. He does public policy there. Coming up, he coordinated the U.S. AID response to Ebola, and he's here to tell us what's gone wrong this time and what we can do about it. He'll go back over some of the issues about what can be done. What did we learn from Ebola? Did we learn those lessons, and are we applying them this time with a little bit of advice, perhaps, for the Trump administration as they try to pick their way through this exceedingly difficult, complicated, and important issue? That's coming up next. That's on Balance of Power on Bloomberg Radio. Jason.
This one shouldn't take long. Of course, if it had a cover, I might not be bothered. Can't see what's under there. And they'd have chained the back wheel. It would have taken me much longer, especially if the chain's off the ground. Makes it harder to cut. This one doesn't even have a lock on the front. So, in the time I've been talking to you, I've nicked it.
On average, in London, a scooter or motorbike is stolen every hour. Make sure it's not yours. Lock your bike, chain the rear wheel, and cover to make it harder to steal. Lock, chain, cover. The Met Police.
We've all been in one, but how much do you really know about black cabs? For instance, did you know that a black cab has to be tall enough to accommodate an individual wearing a bowler hat? That's a lot of space for you and your briefcase. Or that Free Now drivers can use the bus lanes, the perfect getaway to make your meeting in time. And with 2-minute central London pickups, you needn't waste time searching for a taxi. Just download the Free Now app today and take the hassle out of getting round London.
markets, headlines, and breaking news 24 hours a day at Bloomberg.com, the Bloomberg Business app, and on Quick Take by Bloomberg. This is a Bloomberg Business Flash.
Stocks are down about 5%, coming back from some extreme losses. The top 7% actually triggered a trading halt as a full-blown oil price war is rattling financial markets already on edge for days now because of the spreading coronavirus. Treasury yields are down, crude's down more than 30%, and credit markets have buckled. We look at the actual numbers every 15 minutes throughout the trading day. S&P 500 now down 4.6%, down 136. The Dow is down 4.8%, down 1,238. The NASDAQ is down 3.9%, down 338. The 10-year is up 1.7%. The yield is 0.5793%. West Texas Intermediate crude is down 16.3% at $34.55 a barrel. COMEX gold is down 0.5% at $16.6430 an ounce. Dollar yen is at 102.54. The euro is $1.1430, and the British pound $1.3094. That's a Bloomberg Business Flash. I'm Greg Jarrett. David Weston continues now with Balance of Power.
Thanks so much, Greg Jarrett. From the Interactive Broker Studio, this is Balance of Power on Bloomberg Radio. President Trump's initial response to news of the coronavirus was that it was, in his words, totally under control. But since then, it seemed anything but. Jeremy Konyndyk, who coordinated the U.S. response to the Ebola crisis under President Obama as the director of USAID's Office of U.S. Foreign Disaster Assistance. He's now a senior policy fellow at the Center for Global Development, and he joins us now together with James Fallows, national correspondent for The Atlantic. He's a prize-winning author, and he's veteran of course, the Jimmy Carter White House. Thank you, gentlemen, so much for joining us. So, Jeremy, you've got a piece in the New York Times suggesting maybe the Trump administration is not learning all the lessons it should have from the Ebola experience.
Yeah, that's absolutely right. One of the first things that John Bolton did when he came in as National Security Advisor was actually to dismantle the unit that had been set up after Ebola to prepare against events exactly like this one. And I think that was an indication early on in the administration that they weren't taking this threat seriously, and we're beginning to see the fallout from that now.
Did something similar happen in the Obama administration? Did it take them a while to really catch up with how serious Ebola was?
I think the explosion in West Africa caught us off guard, just like it caught the world off guard, and we set that unit up because we didn't want a future administration ever to be caught off guard again. The first time you make a mistake, it's understandable, but repeating a mistake someone has already made and learned from is less forgivable.
So, James, you are a veteran of the government. I think it's fair to say you not only were in it, but you've covered it for many years now. How do you strike the right balance if you're inside the government between, on the one hand, unduly causing panic in the people, and on the other hand, leaving it too short?
It's a delicate but crucial balance, and I think that in every administration, the exact cause of a crisis differs from administration to administration, but there is always something that happens that nobody foresaw, whether it was the Three Mile Island disaster with Ronald Reagan back in 1981, or whether it was John F. Kennedy with the Bay of Pigs, or whether it was George W. Bush with the, of course, 9/11 attacks. And what is crucial is that in the first day or two, and then going forward, is that the administration be believable, that people have some sense that in a difficult circumstance, the administration is saying, this is what to be concerned about, this is what not to be concerned about. And that is a lesson you can derive, that the circumstances of the emergency are always different, but the reality, the inevitability of some unpredictable surprise, that is something that affects every administration. And I think that this one has gone a very long way towards squandering its credibility, which they're trying now, mainly through the person of Dr. Fauci, to restore.
Exactly. That's what I was going to ask Jeremy. Actually, we heard Dr. Fauci yesterday on NBC actually come out and give some advice, for example, to the elderly or people with compromised situations. Are they reestablishing some of their credibility? And let's also bring Alex Azar, the head of HHS, in here. Jeremy, are they on their way to reestablishing their credibility?
I think it's going to be very difficult if the entire credibility of the U.S. government on this matter rests on Tony Fauci. Dr. Fauci is amazing. I have immense respect for him, but he can't be the only credible voice in the government on this. And when he is being, when his advice is being contradicted regularly by the president or watered down regularly by the Health and Human Services Secretary, it's very difficult to get a coherent message out. And that's one of the big lessons we had on Ebola is you need message discipline. I think they're trying to get message discipline, but they're trying to get message discipline that's not necessarily based in science and evidence right now, and that's a problem.
Well, that is an issue, of course, with this administration. At the same time, Jim, are we a little harsh on this administration as a practical matter? I mean, do we really grade them more toughly than we might another administration?
So, of course, everybody should be fair-minded, but I think a fair-minded assessment is this has been disastrously incompetent handling, not simply by the standards of other administrations, but by the standards of the rest of the world. We now, the world is now harsh on the Chinese leadership for covering things up for the first month or so, and then for swinging to the opposite extreme, but they seem to have been evidence-based in what they were doing. The South Koreans are, Japan is a cautionary example. South Koreans are a more positive example, but it's hard to think of a government around the world that has been less credible in its response than the U.S. government in the last couple of weeks. Again, we'll see whether that is recoverable.
Well, an interesting question, though, and it's quite different, Jeremy, from what you had in Africa, is the state and local public health officials. Because some people I talk to say, you know what, the strength of the U.S. system actually isn't just CDC, it isn't just NIH. It's that there's state and local public health officials really who know what they're doing, and that is a lot of a resourcefulness that we didn't have in Africa with Ebola.
No, that's true, but I think it overlooks the fact that neither of those components can stand up on their own, right? Mm-hmm. So the state and locals rely heavily on CDC for guidance and direction in a crisis like this. They're not built to battle a pandemic without being able to rely on and turn to support from the CDC. And one of the really concerning things that seems to be emerging, particularly through a report over the weekend about the White House vetoing a CDC recommendation on air travel by older travelers, is you do begin to wonder what else is CDC not being allowed to say, and certainly we're not seeing a lot of urgent action and direction from CDC to the state and local level, and it's leaving them a little bit rudderless right now.
So, Jeremy, let me put you back in the federal government today, and let's assume the President of the United States says, okay, I'll do whatever you tell me to do. What would you tell him to do? What's the number one thing they should be doing differently or just doing that they're not doing now?
I think it starts with being honest with yourself about what the government needs to do, because you can't have an effective strategy if you don't have an honest, clear-eyed understanding of the risk, and being honest with the American people about what that risk looks like, and continuing to say that it's under control or that the risk is low, which they've been doing up until very recently, sends the wrong message, but ultimately it undermines credibility. So it all has to start with that.
So, James, I just know you're going to say, James Fellow, you're going to say, of course, you should be honest and you should have integrity. No question about that. That's the starting point. But to what extent might we be exacerbating the problem? Because, in fact, people get more anxious if they're not hearing what they believe is the truth out of the federal government. Then they assume it's worse than we know.
Yes, and let me say something positive about the administration's response. I think that Vice President Pence actually has set a positive tone in his last couple of briefings. One indication was he went out of his way to praise Governor Newsom of California, who is a Democrat, as opposed to Donald Trump criticizing Jay Inslee, a Democratic governor of Washington State. And also, Pence, I think, has been giving the stage to the people who are the actual experts, saying, here are the things we know, here are things we don't know. So I think if there were more of that tone, they could let people, they can recognize there is obviously a problem, but if they have a sense that the bounds to it and the reality of it are being dealt with on a fact-based, system, that will reduce, I think, the panicky overreaction.
So, Jeremy, finally, if you were in the government making the decision, would you err on the side of more quarantines, more separation rather than less, despite the damage to the economy?
I think at this point we've got two paths, and they're both damaging to the economy. We can continue to delay action and continue to be reactive, and that may lessen the immediate-term economic pain, but it greatly worsens the long-term economic pain. Or we can begin taking more aggressive measures now, which will be painful in the short term. Canceling something like Comic-Con in Seattle, that's painful. but the damage that would do to public health and then the economic damage from that would be much greater.
Thank you so much to Jeremy Konondyke of the Center for Global Development and to James Fallows of The Atlantic. Coming up, markets continue to reel from the coronavirus. We bring you up to speed. That's coming up next. This is Balance of Power. We are on Bloomberg Radio.
Hey, have you heard? The Mayor of London has launched his latest van scrappage scheme to help tackle London's toxic air. Small businesses or sole traders like me with a polluting van could now get £7,000, which you could use to trade up to a Euro 6 vehicle. And you could get an extra £2,500 towards running costs if you go electric. The scheme is now even easier to qualify for, and it's open to any businesses with up to 50 employees, like mine. So, I'm going to search TfL scrappage to see if I'm eligible and apply. You should do the same. To the Mayor of London and TfL, every journey matters.
Petrol or electric? Why choose petrol and electric? Discover the BMW plug-in hybrid and electric range. 14th to the 21st of March. Visit your BMW retailer. Sometimes electric, always BMW. Participating retailers only.
This week on the New Yorker Radio Hour, we'll ask whether America is ready to elect a Democratic socialist for president. Plus, the science fiction legend William Gibson on climate change and the end of the future.
How often do you hear the phrase, the 22nd century? Don't hear it. We no longer have that sense of cultural anticipation.
Listen to this episode of the New Yorker Radio Hour on TuneIn today.
Are you curious what others are listening to on TuneIn? Head to the trending section under Browse to see the most popular stations and podcasts among TuneIn listeners right now. Check it out. You might just discover something new for yourself.
The puck drops. 12 players face off to win. The suspense is pure torture, but you wouldn't miss this for the world. TuneIn brings you every minute of the NHL season. Listen live to hockey when it matters most on TuneIn.
Markets, headlines, and breaking news 24 hours a day at Bloomberg.com, the Bloomberg Business app, and on Quick Take by Bloomberg. This is a Bloomberg Business Flash.
Stocks are down just over 5%. They've been whipsawing back from losses. The top 7% and triggered a trading halt as a full-blown oil price war did rattle financial markets already on edge over the spreading coronavirus. Treasury yields have plummeted. Crude is down more than 30%, and credit markets have buckled. The S&P is now down about 18% from its February 19th all-time high, threatening to end the record-long bull market that began 11 years ago on this date. Happy anniversary. We check the markets every 15 minutes throughout the trading day. S&P 500 is down over 5%, down 151. Dow Jones Industrial Average is down 5.3%, down 1,364. And the NASDAQ is down 4.5%, down 384. The 10-year is up 1.75%. The 10-year yield is 0.5763%. West Texas Intermediate crude oil is down 17.2% at $34.20 a barrel. Let's look at COMEX gold. It's down 0.2% at $1668.60 an ounce. The dollar yen is at 102.45. The euro at $1.1433, and the British pound at $1.3103. Another look at the S&P, now down 152 points. That's a Bloomberg Business Flash. I'm Greg Jarrett. Balance of Power continues with David Weston.
Thanks very much, Greg. Markets are reeling around the world today in response to the coronavirus, and then there was that price war between Russia and Saudi Arabia over oil. Joining us now to keep us up to date is Kriti Gupta. She is Bloomberg Markets Live reporter. Thanks for being here, Kriti. So we can start with equities. It's bad, although not as bad as it was at one point.
That's right. We were down, I believe, about 7%. We triggered that trading halt, and now we're back down to 5%, which is actually, can you believe it, having people a little bit relieved that we're only down 5% on the day. These are the crazy times we live in after 2 weeks of volatility where we did see price swings go into 4 or 5% on the day, both in both directions. And now, like I said, some signs of relief that we're only down 5% on the day in the major averages. I believe less so in the NASDAQ and the Dow.
And the 10 years given up a little bit here as well. I mean, the yield has come up over 50 basis points, like 57 basis points at this point. But basically, they're pricing in the Fed to keep cutting, right?
That's right. It seems like the Fed is going to be what's going to rescue markets. We kind of have this new theme developing here among institutions with this buyers coming. That the institutions, I'm talking about the Fed, I'm talking about OPEC, need to come out and not just do what's expected, but surprise the market. How do you surprise the market? Especially right now when you have the Fed priced in for 2 50 basis point cuts, first in the March 18th meeting and then again in April and then potentially even more after that. How does the Fed beat that? That is really the question of the day.
And the markets didn't like it very much the last time with the last 50-point cut, so I'm not sure exactly what they can do to make the markets a little happier. Okay, many thanks now to Bloomberg's Kriti Gupta. Coming up here, we're going to talk the broader economic effects of the coronavirus around the world as Italy now is quarantining a quarter of its population. We're going to talk with Henrietta Trey's of Veda Partners. That's coming up on Balance of Power on Bloomberg Radio.
This is a Bloomberg Money Minute. It's an ugly day on Wall Street. U.S. stocks are down over 5% after coming back from losses that topped 7% and triggered a trading halt earlier today. This as a full-blown crude price war rattled financial markets already on edge over the spreading coronavirus. Right now, the Dow is falling 1,400 points, S&P down 152, NASDAQ dropping 393 points. West Texas Intermediate crude is down 17% to $34.36 a barrel. Meanwhile, the Trump administration is drafting measures to blunt the economic fallout from coronavirus and help slow its spread in the U.S., including a temporary expansion of paid sick leave and possible help for companies facing disruption from the outbreak, according to people familiar with the matter. Donna Wilson, Bloomberg Radio.
Message and data rates may apply. T&C and privacy terms can be found at babbel.com/terms. Please don't text and drive.
Have you wanted to speak a new language, but you thought it'd be too hard or take too much time? Then try Babbel for free by texting EXPLORE to 64,000. In just 15 minutes a day, you'll be on your way to speaking a new language in just a few weeks. And right now, you can try Babbel for free. Babbel starts out teaching you words and phrases by matching them with pictures. You won't believe how easy the interactive program is. Soon the sentences get a little bigger, and before you know it, you're having simulated conversations voiced by native speakers. And because Babbel is crafted by language experts and uses the spaced repetition method, in just 10 to 15 minutes a day, you'll be speaking the language of your choice with real confidence. With Babbel, you can speak a language. Just text EXPLORE to 64,000 and start your first lesson in the language of your choice for free. Download the Babbel app or text EXPLORE to 64,000 and try it for free. Text EXPLORE to 64,000.
Hi everyone, Al Roker here. As a guy with his own catchphrase, I appreciate that after 75 years, Smokey's only said,
"Only you can prevent wildfires."
But I'm filling in because there's a lot more to report. Like when it's dry or windy. Be careful burning yard waste, because wildfires can even start in your neck of the woods. Go to SmokeyBear.com to learn more about wildfire prevention. Brought to you by the U.S. Forest Service, your state forester, and the Ad Council.
Revisions, return policies, there are so many ways to redo a decision.
What are the ramifications if she crumbles or doesn't crumble?
Do they have any path other than the courts?
Except here, we have to get it right the first time.
We always talk about the losers in a trade war. Are there winners?
So that you can too.
How does your modeling have to pivot to reflect a different scenario?
Bloomberg Radio, the Bloomberg Business, Radio.com, and iHeartRadio apps, and BloombergRadio.com. Bloomberg, the world is listening. This is Balance of Power with David Weston on Bloomberg Radio.
Coming up on Balance of Power, the world braces for the full economic effects of the coronavirus. We're joined by Henrietta Trey's of Veda Partners. But first, let's get a market check with Greg Jarrett.
Why, thank you. The markets are cratering today. It's what it means to the economy. The Fed and the White House are at odds over just how to respond to the crisis. And the State Department says Americans should avoid cruises because of the coronavirus. That is affecting that industry. And the oil industry, of course, is cratering as well. That because of what has happened between Saudi Arabia and Russia and OPEC Plus, or should I say the collapse of OPEC Plus. We check the markets every 15 minutes throughout the trading day here on Bloomberg Radio. The S&P 500 is down 5.5%, down 162. The Dow is down 5.8%, down 1,496. And the NASDAQ is down 4.8%, down 408. The 10-year is currently up 1.9% with a yield of 0.5608%. West Texas Intermediate crude oil is, let's see here, it's down 18.5% at $33.61 a barrel, while COMEX gold is down 0.3% at $16.67 even per ounce. The dollar yen is at 102.33, the euro $1.1444, and the British pound $1.3108. That is a Bloomberg Business Flash. I'm Greg Jarrett.
Thanks so much, Greg Jarrett. The coronavirus first hit the Chinese economy, but now it's rapidly spreading around the world with a range of views about how bad it will get and how long it will last. We welcome now Henrietta Treyz. She's Veda Partners Director of Economic Policy. Henrietta, always great to have you on, and this is an impossible role for you to figure out what this is going to do to the global economy. But how should we think about that question?
Thanks so much for having me, David. I mean, I think that's exactly the question. And one of the most disconcerting things I see right now in the markets is that there is a very widespread expectation that this is such a dire event that we need immediate fiscal stimulus. You don't hear talk about the Fed anymore. You hear about, this immediate need for fiscal stimulus and an expectation, a very widespread expectation that the United States Congress is going to pass a piece of legislation very quickly. Speaking with, hundreds of investors just in the last 7 days, it's my understanding that there's still widespread expectation for a payroll tax cut, which is something that we saw last during the Great Recession. So the scope and expectation of how bad this is going to be really compares to the 2008 crisis and what we saw then. Unfortunately, on Capitol Hill, and I've just been speaking with staff throughout the day, the threat level is very, very low there until they see, some substantial macroeconomic declines and a technical recession, which obviously is defined by 2 consecutive quarters of declining GDP and employment numbers. We're not going to see a robust response like that. So the disconnect is really where my focus is right now, between the street saying this is a disaster and D.C. basically saying, we'll see.
Henry, it strikes me it's not just the question of the size of the problem or even the duration of the problem, but the nature of the problem. Because, for example, when you talk about payroll tax cuts, okay, that sounds really nice, big stimulus for everyone. But in fact, if part of the problem is hourly workers who are not getting paid because they have to stay home with their kids or they're self-quarantine, a payroll tax cut isn't going to do any good if they're not getting any payroll taxes. I mean, that doesn't quite work. Why aren't we talking instead, for example, about the federal government stepping in on sick pay?
Right, exactly. And that's exactly the message you'll hear from any of the Democrats you speak with, and obviously former NEC Director Gary Cohn this morning. The payroll tax cut is only a topic of conversation because President Trump put it into the ether. If you ask congressional staff what they think their boss might support, whether they'd support a payroll tax holiday, they respond with exactly the points you just made. Payroll tax cuts don't fix coronavirus, so why would we do that? Paid sick leave is something that the Democratic staff has offered. It would be a 14-day sick leave period. Previously, we've seen legislation like this, for instance, in 2009, I want to say, under the H1N1 virus, there was a proposal from Democrats to provide 5 days worth of mandated sick leave by the employers. Obviously, that requires the employer to pay the sick leave, which is something that at the time no Republicans endorsed. So there were 0 Republican supporters of that plan. Although the NEC Director Kudlow and Treasury Secretary Mnuchin are reportedly going to propose that idea to President Trump later on this afternoon. You would get Democratic votes for that. Unfortunately, that bill would never pass in a vacuum. You'd need to get at least 14 days. You'd probably have to have robust conversations around that. And the questions I'm getting from investors are, are we going to see this bill within the next 24 hours? And a more appropriate expectation would be, are we going to see this bill this month? It takes a very long time to pull something like that together, even just for a mandated paid sick leave or, extended or expanded unemployment insurance benefits or an expansion of the child care tax credit, which are all ideas that we've heard from Democratic leadership in the last couple days.
So that points exactly to a question certainly I have, which is how you separate out the underlying substance from the perception. Because I think what we may have seen last week with the Fed, with the 50 basis point cut, which they did, which in another world you say, boy, that's really remarkable, an emergency cut. The markets did not react well at all because the market expectations are so high. Are we talking ourselves into a problem here to some extent by the markets expecting a large across the board fiscal stimulus, and when that doesn't happen, then they'll be disappointed?
Yeah, absolutely. I think that is overwhelmingly the case. It's mentioned, if you're watching Bloomberg or listening to any of your other guests, fiscal stimulus comes up in every single conversation.
Yep, it does. Absolutely true. Yes, that's right.
As somebody who went through the recession, I haven't heard this kind of language since we were doing TARP. So, it's really remarkable. But one of the things that's problematic is that people think it's easy. I'm not sure where that perception came through, but the payroll tax cut, for instance, let's just suspend the reality that it wouldn't help fix coronavirus. But imagine if it did. You're talking $55 billion for a 1 basis point cut to the tax rate just on the employer side. If you want to repeat what we did in 2009, you'd have to go, 2010, you'd have to go 2 points from the employee's side, each point of which is a $70 to $75 billion perspective. And if you did it for a full year and you did both of those, you're talking $300 billion. It took them weeks to pull together an $8.3 billion package, getting a $300 billion package under, still robust GDP numbers, some slight increase in wage growth, and strong unemployment numbers is just very unrealistic to spend that kind of money and have it all be deficit financed. So not only is there widespread expectation for fiscal stimulus, but there's also no appreciation for how costly that might be and what it might ultimately do. I mean, even if you did that, you're talking $250 per employee, rating Social Security, which is another issue, and this is insensitive. But obviously the retirees are the ones who are most at risk for getting the disease in a deadly fashion, and it'd be subsidizing, employees.
So in closing, Henrietta, let me talk about contagion. I don't mean contagion of the virus, but contagion of a recession, because we have a quarter roughly of Italy now in quarantine. There's talk about an Italian recession. There's talking even about a French recession. Can we resist that in the United States if, in fact, recession starts working its way around the world?
Well, I think that the United States has such a robust economy and so diversified that you'll be able to see us withstand just as we have in so many other downturn cases. There will eventually be a cure. We've had a strong economy for over a decade now. So there is a very widespread sense that, the economy is very strong and a head cold won't kill it. And that's sort of the perspective we get from D.C.
Interesting. So is the biggest risk right now over expectation on the fiscal side, would you say?
Yes, absolutely. I mean, we are weeks, if not months, away from that if it comes at all. And when it does, it's going to be much smaller than a $700 billion bazooka, which appears to be what people are hoping for.
Yeah, so don't hold your breath that they're going to take care of it before they go in recess next weekend. Okay. Thank you so much to Henrietta Treyz of Veda Partners. Always great to have you on, Henrietta. Coming up here, Italy is shutting down a quarter of its economy. We're joined by Bloomberg Opinion's Ferdinando Giuliano. He has a piece out on the Bloomberg talking about the test that will be for the democracy in Italy. That's coming up next on Balance of Power on Bloomberg Radio.
Welcome to Costa, the nation's favourite coffee shop. What can I get you?
A flat white, please.
And would you like to enter the 10 million point Costa Coffee Club giveaway?
Yeah.
And collect points towards free coffees and treats in store.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Registered Coffee Club members only. 18 plus, GB only. Excludes Northern Ireland. Purchase required. 9th of March to 5th of April. The question, what is your favourite branded coffee shop, was asked. See costa.co.uk for full details and T's and C's.
Hey, have you heard? The Mayor of London has launched his latest van scrappage scheme to help tackle London's toxic air. Small businesses or sole traders like me with a polluting van could now get £7,000, which you could use to trade up to a Euro 6 vehicle. And you could get an extra £2,500 towards running costs if you go electric. The scheme is now even easier to qualify for, and it's open to any businesses with up to 50 employees, like mine. So, I'm going to search TfL Scrappage to see if I'm eligible and apply. You should do the same. To the Mayor of London and TfL, every journey matters.
And breaking news 24 hours a day at Bloomberg.com, the Bloomberg Business app, and on Quick Take by Bloomberg. This is a Bloomberg Business Flash.
A gut-wrenching slide in U.S. stocks at the open forced a temporary halt in trading as losses topped 7%. Full-blown oil price war rattled financial markets already on edge because of the spreading coronavirus. Treasury yields plummeted, crude went down more than 30%, and credit markets buckled. And we look at the numbers every 15 minutes. Here on Bloomberg Radio, the S&P 500 is currently down 5.5%, down 164. The Dow is down nearly 6%, down 1,525. And the NASDAQ is down 4.75%, down 408. The 10-year is up nearly 2% with a yield of 0.55%. West Texas Intermediate crude oil is now down 19.5% at $33.26 a barrel, while COMEX gold is down 0.3% at $16.6760 an ounce. The dollar yen is at 102.11. The euro is at $1.1463, and the British pound at $1.3124. That's a Bloomberg Business Flash. Now more Bloomberg Balance of Power with David Weston on Bloomberg Radio.
Thank you so much, Greg. Live from the Interactive Broker Studio, this is Balance of Power. I'm David Weston. Italy has now reported over 300 deaths from the coronavirus, with some 650 more in intensive care, and a quarantine imposed on 17 million people in the north of the country. Bloomberg Opinion's Ferdinando Giuliano has written a piece today for the Bloomberg on the test this poses for Italy's democracy, and we welcome him now back to Balance of Power. Ferdinando, thank you so much for joining us. Why is this a test for Italy in particular?
Well, I think it's a test for Italy, but I suspect it's going to be a test for pretty much every Western democracy in the world. We are seeing ever more draconian steps being taken in Italy in an effort to contain and mitigate the spread of the virus. Now, Italy came sooner because the virus affected Italy just before it did other countries in Europe and perhaps the US. So we are a bit ahead of the curve. But what I can tell you is that these measures are likely to appear elsewhere, and they impose some rather severe limits on what people can do. And whether or not governments are able to enforce them effectively, I think that's a real question.
So, Ferdinando, I read that actually your prime minister, in I think in the middle of the night press conference, actually pled with the Italian people, if I can use that strong a word, saying, please don't try to get around this. Please don't try to be too clever on this. Are people responding as far as you can tell?
Well, it's hard to tell. I mean, certainly if you look at trains and airplanes, people aren't moving around that much. But then every now and then you see photos of people who are still, spending their day out on Saturday and Sunday, by the beach in parks. And this may all seem absolutely normal, but at the moment, what everyone should be focusing on is slowing down how fast this infection spreads. And the more time one spends with his friends, talking to each other, maybe close to each other, the more likely this virus, the coronavirus, COVID-19, is likely to spread. And of course, many of us will never realize that because we may not get particularly bad symptoms. But every now and then, and it's not rare at all, someone will catch it very badly and will end up in hospital. And hospitals risk being overwhelmed. We see this in Lombardy these days. Lombardy, the region around Milan, has one of the best healthcare systems in Italy and possibly Europe. And still they just struggle to treat everyone. This is a real problem. And unless, people act soon, it's going to get worse.
Ferdinando, do we have a sense of how close the Italian healthcare system is to being overtaxed? We're having this discussion, of course, in the United States right now. What is our capacity? As you said quite correctly, the idea of quarantining, the idea of staying home is mainly to slow it down so we don't have too many people in the hospital, and particularly in intensive care at a time. Do you have a sense of how close we are to being overwhelmed in the north of Italy?
Well, I think in Lombardy we are at that point. The government is rushing to add more beds, and in particular intensive care units, which are what's around, I think, 5% of people who are caught by the coronavirus end up in. And doctors are already having to make choices on who to treat, whether because they just can't treat everyone. So maybe there will be older patients with some illnesses which have a lower, life expectancy, or maybe doctors think they will not survive this treatment after all. And so doctors choose maybe a younger patient who may have a slightly higher chance of surviving. We're already at that point, and I fear this will happen in other countries too unless decisive steps are taken.
Yeah, it's triage, which is, of course, cruel, but sometimes needed to protect more people. First and foremost, this is a personal tragedy for those who are ill, and particularly those who lose their lives. There is an economic aspect to it, however. And is Italy particularly vulnerable here? Their economy was not doing great to begin with. I think you're very dependent upon tourism. This will certainly affect tourism profoundly. And also, I read today even luxury goods that Italy's known for. Is Italy particularly vulnerable right now?
Well, I think it's vulnerable as other countries for everything which our social lives depends on. Bars, restaurants, even shops at the moment are really struggling because people don't go out that much. And yes, of course, tourism is going to suffer enormously because, understandably, people don't want to travel. Now, I think Italy's been hit a bit too much because it came first. We'll soon realize that this is not an Italian problem, much like it wasn't a Chinese problem. It's a global problem. But yes, because Italy has a very large public debt, it doesn't have too much room to stimulate the economy via a large fiscal stimulus. And of course, the bond market is concerned. We saw it today with bonds, with the yields on Italian bonds rising and spreads with German bonds rising too. So let's see what the ECB decides to do on Thursday when it meets. I think it's going to be a very important day.
Yes, it will. No question. We're all looking forward to hearing from Madame Lagarde. At the same time, does Italy have something going for it? Tell us about your social net, as it were, because that's something that we're talking about here in the United States right now. Things like sick pay, which a lot of smaller companies do not have. Do you have a pretty strong social net under people so that if, in fact, they do have to stay home, they still get paid?
Well, it's mainly an informal social network. Now, the government does have a scheme to, really top up pay when people are, maybe less used by companies. But, there are lots of self-employed people here who may not be able to benefit from such schemes. Now, the government is really trying to reach these people as well. But, there's going to be a lot of money which needs to be spent, and it's not clear how much room for maneuver the Italian government really has.
You mentioned earlier, Ferdinando, that this is not just an Italian problem, it is a global problem, as we learned with China. At the same time, is this putting strain on Italy's relations with some other European countries? I mean, I read that some countries in Europe are now saying we don't want anybody flying here from Italy or flying to Italy from here.
Well, I mean, I think there are a number of kind of European problems. One is exactly the one you mentioned. I have to say the European Union is being very good in keeping its borders open. There would be a strong pressure on individual countries to shut the border from each other, but I think governments are wisely not doing that. But you see, some issues, for example, with medical equipment and face masks, with countries like Germany and France even. Limiting their exports of these face masks, for example, or other equipment, and I think this is really bad for European solidarity and what the future of the European Union, because people are going to remember that at a time of need, everyone was behaving rather selfishly.
Do we have a sense of where it came from? For Italy. How it got so bad in Italy, in the north of Italy, so quickly? Do we know where it came from?
It's not. I mean, it's not clear. It's possible. There are theories. There is a theory which says that there was that actually the virus came through a patient. Through a person from Germany, who obviously was undetected because everyone was so concentrated on the Chinese.
Right.
there is one, it's possible that it was undetected in the region for some time.
It's similar here, actually. We're having it increasingly. We just don't know where it comes from, Westchester County here in New York. Okay, many thanks to Ferdinando Giuliano of Bloomberg Opinion. Always great to be with him. Coming up on Balance of Power, I'm joined by my colleague June Grasso to find out what she has coming up next hour. This is Bloomberg Radio.
Have you ever thought, I wish I'd had that information sooner?
What does this tell us about the state of deal making?
Let's fix that.
One unprofitable company plus another doesn't make a profitable company.
Carol Mazur.
Talk to us about real-world applications.
Jason Kelly.
Remind us what the potential is for everyday folk.
Bloomberg Business Week.
Vice President of Exploratory Science is one of the cooler titles.
Weekday afternoons at 2 Eastern on Bloomberg Radio, the Bloomberg Business app, and BloombergRadio.com. Bloomberg Business Week, now live on YouTube.
Not completing high school is more of a social thing than it was an academic thing. Even though all these years have passed, I still had that longing to have my diploma.
At age 30, Carissa finished her high school diploma.
If you're even considering getting your high school diploma, you can do it.
No one gets a diploma alone. If you're thinking of finishing your high school diploma, you have help. Find free adult education classes near you at finishyourdiploma.org. That's finishyourdiploma.org. Brought to you by the Dollar General Literacy Foundation and the Ad Council.
Vatsal Shah is Senior Project Engineer at Mott MacDonald, a global engineering consultancy with more than 16,000 employees. He earned his PhD at New Jersey Institute of Technology, and as an adjunct professor is helping NJIT students explore emerging technologies.
My focus is renewable markets, emerging technologies, the idea of floating cities. What are we doing to develop that? What will happen to the city on the water? Well, you're going to have waves hitting it. You're going to have solar. How are you going to develop plants? How are you going to develop vegetation and farming? That sort of thought process happens at NJIT. We actually plan out what will the city look like. How do we develop that? So in 10 years, we're actually ready to take on those challenges when we have our first development in the water. NJIT also has been doing a lot of work in self-healing materials. So taking the polymers and the new material that we have in our material sciences departments and putting them into things like concrete, things like steel, reinforcing our soil.
NJIT, New Jersey Institute of Technology. Learn more at njit.edu.
You're listening to Balance of Power with David Weston on Bloomberg Radio.
Welcome back to Balance of Power. I'm David Weston. I'm joined now by my colleague June Grasso to find out what she has coming up next hour.
Well, of course, we're going to be talking about the coronavirus, but about the lawsuits around the coronavirus already, and there are a lot more to come. We're going to be exploring that. Harvey Weinstein back in the news. Prosecutors are recommending a really stiff sentence for him, but not saying exactly how much time they want. And then the House is asking all 16 judges on the D.C. Court of Appeals to hear its case about that subpoena of former White House counsel Don McGahn that's been in litigation for months now.
Okay, so that's a lot. So let's start at the beginning. Who's suing whom on the coronavirus? That's fascinating. I haven't followed that at all.
Well, already American Airlines pilots sued because they wanted to prevent the airline from flying to China. Then you might have recalled that the city of Costa Mesa, California, sued the government to stop transfer of quarantined passengers on one of the cruise ships to Costa Mesa. That worked because it worked out without really going through the courts because the situation just evolved and they didn't have to do it. And then recently, the city of San Antonio is suing the federal government as well because there was an incident where they had a woman in quarantine and she tested negative for the coronavirus twice, and the government let her go. And then a few days later, she tested positive for the coronavirus. So San Antonio wants the federal government to have, more stringent requarements. And I've heard, for example, one of the passengers on board one of the cruise ships who was quarantined said he had to have 3 negative tests in order to be released. So this is something, one negative test is apparently not enough. And then, we're going to explore think about all the companies now, what companies have to do. And they have to, have an environment in the workplace that's safe as can be. They also have to make sure that they have adequate facilities if people want to work from home. When do you say don't come into work? And how many lawsuits? Also, an interesting part of this is the right to privacy. how much information can you ask your employees some questions that you might want to ask them, David?
And if you don't, are you liable if you let them come and they get sick? But I hadn't thought about this. I should have. I'm slow on the uptake here. Those cruise lines, if you're on a cruise ship and you paid a lot of money to do these things, not only your money back, but you got sick or maybe some people died.
Oh,
you get some wrongful death actions.
I'm sure. And also there seemed to be, negligence as far as the cruise ships are concerned. I mean, they were not ready for this. I mean, who was? But they, especially in that environment where it seems to be like a petri dish for coronavirus. So, the question is going to be, what did they do? Did they do it correctly? And so those are just a small part of the lawsuits that may come. And I think companies right now are really facing a lot of questions that they hadn't thought about before, how to handle this.
Yeah, crises are good for the lawyers. I think it's sad to say.
Isn't that true? I think I said plaintiffs' lawyers must be clapping their hands, certain plaintiffs'
lawyers.
Wait
for the class actions and things like that. That's exactly right.
Absolutely.
So Doug McGahn, I forgot all about that one.
I know. Because
Didn't they basically said it's between Congress and the executive branch. We're not going to get involved?
That's what the court said. It was a 2-to-1 vote. Yeah. And, of course, it was Republican-appointed judges versus a Democrat-appointed judge. But the judge below, if you'll remember, she wrote something like a 100-page opinion about why if not this, then how do you have the president responsible to the Congress? How is there oversight if he won't even respond, get one of his people to respond to a subpoena? So, and also I'm sort of questioning how much this sort of crosses with the cases that the Supreme Court's going to hear at the end of the month.
Yeah, exactly right. But I guess some people would say that's why you have impeachment. That's how you enforce it. That's what you're supposed to do, impeach him. Oh, by the way, I guess we did that.
Remember during the impeachment, the White House lawyer said you should have subpoenaed him in the courts.
That's right. That's true. Okay. So that's all coming up in the second hour of Balance of Power with June Grasso. That does it for me today. I'm David Weston. This is Bloomberg Radio.
This is a Bloomberg Pursuits look at luxury. Well, here's a silver lining to the coronavirus outbreak, at least for consumers. Even bargain hunters can now afford lobster. U.S. lobster prices have plummeted to the lowest in at least 4 years after the spread of the virus halted charter flights to Asia during the Chinese New Year high season. The fallout has left thousands of pounds of unsold lobster flooding North American markets from Canada, turning the special occasion luxury into a more accessible treat. That same consumer-producer dichotomy is playing out in California, where a 2-year grape glut means wine deals are on their way. For wine lovers, the quality California juice that's been going into $25-plus name-brand wines will start turning up in bottles that cost half that price. But for winemakers, the glut combined with the lowest demand in 25 years saw grape prices plummet up to 40%. Some growers have even started ripping out vines to plant pistachios. Visit BloombergPursuits.com for more. I'm Andrew O'Day, Bloomberg Radio.
Tom Keene and Jonathan Farrow enjoy each other's company.
Most of us don't speak Mandarin. John, do you speak Mandarin?
I do not speak Mandarin.
I just wanted to check that.
Almost as much as they enjoy grilling economic experts.
When this is over, do you bounce back, or is there a lasting weakness to it?
Which means that you will enjoy listening.
If things get worse, we're ready to do more.
Bloomberg Surveillance, weekday mornings at 7 Eastern on Bloomberg Radio, the Bloomberg Business app, and BloombergRadio.com. Bloomberg, the world is listening.
You know your body, and you know when something's off, when something doesn't feel quite right. Don't ignore symptoms like fatigue, joint pain, rashes, and fever. They could be signs of lupus. Listen to your body. Take care of yourself. We're here to help you take control of your health. Learn how at BeFierceTakeControl.org. Brought to you by the Lupus Foundation of America and the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention.
Not completing high school was more of a social thing than it was an academic thing. I came out in the 11th grade. Nobody was embracing you. The kids were cruel. It was very difficult to be gay. Even though all these years have passed, I still had that longing to have my diploma. The hard part was determining that I was going to do it, but I definitely didn't do it alone.
At age 30, with the help of her mentor, Carissa finished her high school diploma.
I have a mentor, Maria. She convinced me to continue my education and to finish what I started to get my diploma. Just never judges. She's a true role model. If you're even considering getting your high school diploma, go get it. You can do it.
No one gets a diploma alone. If you're thinking of finishing your high school diploma, you have help. Find free adult education classes near you at finishyourdiploma.org. That's finishyourdiploma.org. Brought to you by the Dollar General Literacy Foundation and the Ad Council.
From the financial capital of the world, 24 hours a day at Bloomberg.com, on the Bloomberg Business app, and on Quick Take by Bloomberg. This is Bloomberg Radio. Markets, headlines, and breaking news 24 hours a day at Bloomberg.com, the Bloomberg Business app, and on Quick Take by Bloomberg. This is a Bloomberg Business Flash.
From Bloomberg World Headquarters, I'm Charlie Pellet. Steep losses for global stocks. The Dow, the S&P, and NASDAQ all down by 5.3% or worse, whipsawing back from losses that topped 7% and also triggered a trading halt earlier as a full-blown oil price war rattles financial markets already on edge over the spreading coronavirus. Treasury yields plummeted, crude sank more than 30% in the early going, credit markets buckled. So here's where we stand right now. We begin with the 10-year. Look at that yield, 0.51% on the 10-year. The Dow, the S&P, NASDAQ all plunging. S&P down 180 points now. That is a drop of 6%. The Dow is down 1,647 points. That's a drop of 6.4%. NASDAQ down 455 points, a decline now of 5.5%. Gold, little change, down 0.1%, $16.72 the ounce. Crude, an ongoing major story. West Texas Intermediate plunging now by 19.2%, $33.32 a barrel on WTI. Brent, $36.37 for a barrel of Brent. That is a drop right now of 19.6%. Francisco Blanch is global head of commodities and derivatives research at BofA Securities. And on Bloomberg Radio this morning, he was asked about winners and losers amid the oil sell-off.
I think it's going to be consumers benefiting here. Obviously, consumers in many parts of the world are not really traveling that much because of the coronavirus. But if you are able to travel, you're going to get a pretty good deal with the drop in fuel prices that we're seeing right now.
And again, West Texas Intermediate down now by 19%. 102 on Wall Street. Time now for the Market Drivers Report with a focus on American depository receipts. And here is Dave Wilson.
Thanks, Charlie. ADRs are falling even more than U.S. shares. The S&P ADR index is down 8%, and the S&P 500 is lower by 5.8%. The ADR index has 148 stocks, and every one of them is lower. The index headed for its steepest decline since December 2008. Energy ADRs are leading the way down as they tumble along with oil prices after Russia and Saudi Arabia cut the price of crude. Among UK producers, BP is down almost 19%. And Royal Dutch Shell has lost 16% in U.S. trading. France's Total is also down 16%. Brazil's Petrobras down 26%, and Russia's Lukoil is down 22.5%. And South Africa's Sasol has plunged almost 43%. Falling energy prices heighten concern about the oil and chemical companies' debt levels. Sasol lost its investment-grade bond rating from Moody's Investors Service last week. And banks' ADRs are falling as oil and the coronavirus outbreak are weighing on the economic outlook. France's Société Générale is down more than 17.5%. The Netherlands' ING Group is down more than 12%. And Spain's BBVA is also down more than 12%, Charlie.
All right, we thank you very much, Dave Wilson, tracking those American depository receipts. Again, recapping here, steep losses for the U.S. equity market. S&P down 169 points, down 5.7%. The Dow down 1,581 points, down 6.1%. NASDAQ down 425, down 5%. The 10-year yielding 0.51%. I'm Charlie Pellet. That's a Bloomberg Business Flash.
This is Balance of Power.
We have the strongest economy by far in the world.
We need an economy that works for everybody. I am the one who has the broadest coalition.
Where the world of politics meets the world of business.
They've got the money they need to run a very competitive race. These lawyers brought the case, and in my view, they should be sanctioned.
We want certainty in the markets. We want certainty in our trading relationships.
The administration is trying to create a new divided world.
Balance of Power with David Weston on Bloomberg Radio.
Welcome to the second hour of Balance of Power. I'm June Grosso. Ahead in this hour, we're going to be talking about the coronavirus, a fertile breeding ground for many types of lawsuits. What should companies be doing now? Prosecutors are recommending a stiff sentence for Harvey Weinstein, who'll be sentenced this week. And the House wants all 16 judges on the D.C. Court of Appeals to hear its case to subpoena former White House counsel Don McGahn. But first, the coronavirus has upended markets, disrupted supply chain, and forced quarantines. That means lawsuits, and they've already begun. Joining me is Jay Bhattacharya. He is a professor of medicine at Stanford. Thanks for joining us, Professor.
Oh, my pleasure.
So right now we see that companies are making some tough decisions about policies and procedures, a lot with legal risks in mind. What should companies be doing now?
I think the coronavirus is a very difficult thing for companies to address, largely because there really isn't a good answer. On the one hand, if you, for instance, I work at Stanford. The university has basically shut down the classes and moved them online for the next 2 weeks. Many conferences are canceled. If they don't do this, they leave themselves open to essentially ignoring the crisis. On the other hand, the operations losses are very, very substantial, and there are many activities that you can do over teleconference, but many activities you can't. You have to do in person. It's a very difficult time, I think, largely because of the uncertainty about over those two very, very different paths.
And as far as getting true information about the dangers here, we have the president saying one thing, the vice president saying another. Here in New York, we've had Governor Andrew Cuomo on a great deal talking about, what exactly is happening and what's available. So I feel like we're getting a source of information there, but I'm not sure about the rest of the country.
Yeah, I think the main problem is that there isn't consistent information available yet, largely because we're still, in some sense, in early days. We have a lot of experience in China, with obviously with a very different healthcare system, and South Korea, which have shown that I think that the mortality rates that they initially reported are probably lower than they actually are, probably overstated the risk from the virus. In the following sense, there's a lot of testing that occurs when a patient goes to a hospital, but there's lots of people who probably have the virus who don't get very, very sick or don't end up in the hospital that don't get tested. So the death rate just counts the people that are at the hospital. Obviously that's going to be a relatively sick part of the population compared to the people who don't get sick and don't go to the hospital as well as getting sick. So the death rate is probably lower than we're hearing, and you can see this in the South Korean data. In South Korea, they tested a larger population, and the mortality numbers are substantially lower than the numbers that they got out of China, where they tended to focus on hospitalized patients.
Now, I'm curious about large public gatherings because a lot of the schools are closing down. They're going to have online classes, but some large public gatherings are still going on. I know there was a huge concert in New Jersey last night, and I know this because my daughter insisted on going. I wanted her to stay home. So, what to do about those large gatherings? Should they be canceled at this point? Should you not go?
It's hard to make a universal call. I have not seen the public health authorities argue that it makes sense to cancel all of them. In a sense, that would make sense if our healthcare system was getting overwhelmed by the number of infections. I think the wise thing to do is that if you're in a vulnerable group, so if you're older or you have some underlying health condition, you should avoid those large gatherings. If you're younger, even then you should think carefully. Is it really worth it? Because there's some risk. Now, for younger people, the evidence suggests, and for people that don't have underlying health conditions, the evidence suggests that the mortality rate is very, very low. It's like a flu, or even and in fact, for children, we're seeing very, very few deaths. So maybe the risk isn't so huge in that population. The reason to avoid to shut down the large gatherings is to slow the spread of the condition. At some level, given how effective it is, it's unlikely that we're going to be able to eliminate the spread of the condition of the virus. But on the other hand, if you you are in a vulnerable group, then you probably shouldn't just go, even if they don't shut them down.
And what about hand washing and sanitizing everything? Because when you think about it, it's almost impossible if you're in an office to keep sanitizing everything, and you have, your phone you pick up, you have your keyboard, and it just seems really difficult to keep the sort of sterile atmosphere that people seem to be suggesting would be the best course.
Yeah, I think the first order thing, that's actually one of the good things that will come out of this. I think people will remember to wash their hands. That's a really cheap and easy thing, and you can basically do it in almost any office. As far as sanitizing absolutely everything, I don't know that there's a ton of evidence that actually helps a lot. Keeping your phone clean, that's something we also probably ought to do more. So I think I would look to be sensible about it. You wash your hands, before you eat, wash your hands after you go to the bathroom. Maybe people have been bumping elbows instead of shaking hands. Maybe that's not such a bad habit.
The shaking hands. It seems to me like, I wonder how much in regular times germs are passed by shaking hands.
Yeah, it's quite a bit more than bumping elbows. But I think in that sense, some good will come out of it. I don't think going overboard where you try to spray everything down. I don't see a lot of evidence that helps. At least not in the literature that I've read. On the other hand, hand washing there's a lot of good evidence that does help not just slow the spread of this condition, but also lots of other infectious diseases. So I think that's a good outcome.
All right. Thanks so much for joining us today. That is Professor Jay Bhattacharya of the University of Stanford. Coming up, we're going to be talking about Harvey Weinstein. He's going to be sentenced this week, and prosecutors have filed their sentencing memo recommendation. They're recommending a stiff sentence, but they're not saying just how many years. It could be up to 29. I'm June Grosso, and this is Bloomberg.
If you promise to cover the latest financial and business news from Asia,
we're talking about social enterprises in Asian countries
with expert analysts who really understand Asia.
Aren't you encouraged with respect to U.S.-China trade?
Then you must be us.
Tell us about the trend within this part of the world.
Bloomberg Daybreak Asia.
What sort of fiscal stimulus do you think we'll see?
Tonight at 6 Eastern on Bloomberg Radio, the Bloomberg Business app, and BloombergRadio.com. Bloomberg, the world is listening.
The possibility of lung cancer can be pretty scary, especially if you're one of approximately 8 million current or former smokers at high risk. That's why SaveByTheScan.org wants you to know that now there's a breakthrough low-dose CT scan that can detect lung cancer early, and it only takes 60 seconds. You stop smoking, now start screening. For an easy quiz to see if you're eligible, visit SaveByTheScan.org. It could save your life. SaveByTheScan.org is brought to you by the American Lung Association's Lung Force Initiative and the Ad Council.
Are you interested in a challenging and exciting career? One where you can be part of solving complex challenges across industries and geographies. Bloomberg's ever-expanding technology, data, news, and media services foster innovation, empower clients, and offer nearly limitless opportunities for career growth. Visit Bloomberg.com/careers today to view our current job opportunities. Bloomberg LP is an equal opportunity employer. The address once again is Bloomberg.com/careers.
Right now, Doctors Without Borders medical teams are operating in some of the most remote and dangerous corners of the world. When front yards become front lines, at the crossroads of conflict and epidemic, where there are no hospitals, that's where we operate. Your response is critical to our response in places where few others will go. That's where we operate. Learn more at doctorswithoutborders.org.
Delayed at the dentist and now you're late for school pickup. You need a free now. Need to take the dog to the vet before lunch. Should have gotten a free now. Trying to get 4 kids and their baggage to the airport. Free now. Sometimes you can't get from A to B fast enough. Download the Free Now app today for quick pickups and reliable drivers, no matter the situation. Less hassle, more hustle with Free Now.
Hey, have you heard? The Mayor of London has launched his latest van scrappage scheme to help tackle London's toxic air.
Small businesses or sole traders like me with a polluting van could now get £7,000, which you could use to trade up to a Euro 6 vehicle. And you could get an extra £2,500 towards running costs if you go electric. The scheme is now even easier to qualify for, and it's open to any businesses with up to 50 employees, like mine. So, I'm going to search TfL Scrappage to see if I'm eligible and apply. You should do the same. To the Mayor of London and TfL, every journey matters.
Did you know your favorite radio stations are in your pocket? Yes, the TuneIn app lets you listen to the same radio stations you pick up on your home or car radio anywhere you want. To see all the stations broadcasting in your area, find the local radio section on the home screen. Keep it local with TuneIn.
This week on the New Yorker Radio Hour, we'll ask whether America is ready to elect a Democratic Socialist for president. Plus, the science fiction legend William Gibson on climate change and the end of the future.
How often do you hear the phrase, the 22nd century? Don't hear it. We no longer have that sense of cultural anticipation.
Listen to this episode of the New Yorker Radio Hour on TuneIn today.
The puck drops. 12 players face off to win. The suspense is pure torture, but you wouldn't miss this for the world. TuneIn brings you every minute of the NHL season. Listen live to hockey when it matters most on TuneIn. When you're not listening to your team, take it to the end zone, the rim, or the net. Keep up with the biggest moments in sports by following TuneIn on social media.
Block, Cook into the end zone for the touchdown.
From reminders of the live top games to tips of the best sports stations and podcasts.
Welcome to Undisputed. We are live from Los Angeles. I'm Jenny Taft here with Skip Bayless.
Follow at TuneIn on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram to get the most out of TuneIn.
Boldly toward change with SEI Investment Manager Services.
I'm Steve Meyer, president of SEI's Investment Manager Services. At SEI, we understand the emerging forces that will define success for asset managers and what firms will need to compete tomorrow. That's why we continually optimize SEI's global operating platform. If your business requires greater agility, our advanced technology, integrated best-in-class systems, and multi-asset expertise can be your catalyst for business transformation.
With SEI Investment Manager Services, you lead the charge in a competitive marketplace. Learn more at SEIC.com/seizechange.
What if you could keep the top economic experts in a conference room next to your office without having to feed them?
Do we need better optics? Do we need some substance? Do CEOs care about ESG?
We have seen quite a lot of stimulus pumped into the system already.
It's the biggest warning yet about the financial risks of climate change.
Now there are more ways to hear us. Bloomberg Radio, the Bloomberg Business, Radio.com, and iHeartRadio apps, and at BloombergRadio.com. Bloomberg, the world is listening.
Business is constantly evolving. Is your financial printer evolving to keep ahead of the curve? At Command Financial, we are redefining financial printing by providing industry-leading expertise, leveraging technology, and honing processes and best practices. Every day, Command helps SEC registrants, as well as members of their working groups, including securities attorneys and investment bankers, prepare, file, and disseminate regulatory and disclosure documents, such as registration statements, M&A documents, and mutual fund prospectuses and reports. Command provides a full range of services to help you effectively complete your deal, meet your disclosure requirements, and achieve your shareholder communications objectives. Visit our website at commandfinancial.com and learn how we're evolving, not only with the times, but also with your business requirements. Command Financial, redefining financial printing.
Markets, headlines, and breaking news 24 hours a day at Bloomberg.com, the Bloomberg Business app, and on Quick Take by Bloomberg. This is a Bloomberg Business Flash.
From Bloomberg World Headquarters, I'm Charlie Pellett. Steep losses for the U.S. stock market. Stocks slumping the most since 2011. Oil is in free fall. Let's begin with crude. West Texas Intermediate plunging 19.1%, down $7.92 the barrel, now $33.36 on WTI. Brent down at 36.37 for a barrel of Brent. That is a drop right now of 20%. Brent crude plunging by $9 a barrel. The 10-year, the yield 0.51%. Gold, little change, down 0.2%, $16.71 the ounce. The Dow, the S&P, NASDAQ, all plunging. S&P down 175 points, down 5.9%. Dow Industrials down 1,627 points. That is a drop of 6.3%. NASDAQ down 445 points, a drop there of 5.2%. I'm Charlie Pellet. That's a Bloomberg Business Flash. Balance of Power continues. Once again, here's your host, June Grosso.
Thank you, Charlie. Well, Harvey Weinstein is in Rikers, awaiting his sentencing on Wednesday for rape in a criminal sexual act. Weinstein still maintains his innocence, and his attorney says he's appealing the conviction. But that sentencing is coming up, and prosecutors are asking the judge for a stiff prison sentence for Weinstein. They cited at least 16 alleged rapes and sexual assaults by the producer dating back to the 1970s in their sentencing memo. Joining me is Peter Jeffrey, Bloomberg News legal editor. So, Peter, Weinstein faces up to 29 years in prison, but the prosecutors didn't suggest a term for the sentence.
In the memo that they sent to the judge on Friday, they didn't give a specific number of years or a term, but they did ask for severe punishment befitting what they say is a whole host of acts, as you said, June, of sexual harassment and assault, separate from the charges, stretching back to 1978, including many of the sorts of alleged acts that came up in the trial, assaulting women, trapping them alone in a room, appearing in a terry cloth bathrobe that then suddenly opened, this kind of thing. But also the memo included a whole section on acts of alleged abusiveness in the workplace, too.
I was surprised by that. It included his abusive behavior in the workplace, including punching his brother Bob. Do prosecutors usually go so far beyond the crime charged in sentencing memos?
Well, in New York State, the prosecutors argued in their letter to the judge there's ample precedent during the sentencing phase, which is what we're approaching this Wednesday, for prosecutors to lay out a picture of the defendant so that the judge can take all that into account when, in this case, he sentences the defendant. Now, of course, we're waiting on pins and needles for the defense memo from Weinstein's lawyers, presenting a very different picture of his life. But what the prosecutors were trying to do in this letter when they talked about Harvey Weinstein throwing staplers at employees and getting people, again, all allegedly, getting people to lie for him and punching out Bob and issuing threats. At one point, the memo says that Harvey Weinstein told Jessica Mann, who was one of the two women at the heart of the indictment, that he would send men with baseball bats after her father. So what the prosecutors are trying to say to the judge is, you have to consider that, in their view, this is a portrait of an inveterately, unrepentantly abusive man, from screaming at employees in the workplace all the way to sexually assaulting women, in deciding on the term.
The prosecutor said throughout his entire adult professional life, defendant has displayed a staggering lack of empathy, treating others with disdain and inhumanity. Of course, the judge has heard during the trial a lot, the whole thing. So perhaps he will base his decision on what he's heard. Now, you mentioned that we haven't heard from the defense yet. Have there been any letters? Lots of times, most times, when defendants are sentenced, there are letters from people in the community talking them up.
Mm-hmm. And when the defense files its memo recommending the punishment that their client should get, no doubt there will be testimonials and letters. I should note, right, just for a second, back on the prosecution side, that the two women at the heart of the indictment are themselves expected to file victim impact statements.
And they may testify at the sentencing.
I don't actually know.
Well, we'll find out on Wednesday. I want to talk a little bit about his appeal, because he is going to appeal, obviously. The defense is going to argue that the judge made a bad call in allowing those extra witnesses you were talking about. Yeah. In New York, they're known as Molyneux witnesses, about his prior bad acts. Tell us, for those who didn't follow the trial closely, tell us about who testified and How did that stray from normal procedure?
Well, I'm not sure it entirely strayed from all normal procedure, but you are right, June, that in New York, these are called Molyneux witnesses. In this case, there were 3 of them. And what the prosecution won the right to do was to introduce their testimony. These were 3 women who described assaults by Weinstein very similar to the ones described at the heart of the indictment. And their purpose was to, from the prosecutor's point of view, was to show that the sexual acts with the women in the indictment were not consensual. And now, don't forget, the heart of Weinstein's defense was that they were consensual. So the appearance of these 3 women, who weren't part of the charges themselves, was meant to persuade the jury that when it came time for them to consider the 2 women who were at the heart of the charges, that they would find that it was likely, as with the past, that Weinstein had acted without consent. And the reason that the defense is making focusing on these 3 witnesses is that in addition to these 3 witnesses, the prosecutors then called corroborating witnesses to those extra 3. And so what Weinstein's lawyers are saying is, I think they called it a trial within a trial.
Yes.
And that's going to be one of the bases for their appeal.
Yeah. Have you ever heard of corroborating witnesses who are corroborating the witness?
It's happened before, but I think that the extent to which, there were 28 witnesses that took the stand against Weinstein, I think that the defense will argue that it was prejudicial against their client to the jurors.
They're also arguing, just a minute here, but they're also arguing that the jury was tainted because news of his trial in Los Angeles came out as the jury was being picked.
Yes, news of his indictment in L.A., that's right. The very first day of Weinstein's trial in New York, January 6th, which was the beginning of jury selection, the news was announced that the Los Angeles county attorney had brought charges very similar to the ones in New York, sexual assault charges against Weinstein. And his lawyers are arguing, how could the jury, which was just then being selected, possibly be fair and impartial when they were exposed to this news?
There were a lot of questions there, and we'll see what happens on appeal. Also, we'll wait for that sentencing memo to come in from the defendant. That is on Wednesday. We're going to hear what the judge decides. Thank you so much, Peter. That's Peter Jeffrey, Bloomberg News legal editor. Coming up on Balance of Power, we're going to be talking about the stock market slump and the plunge today, more than 5%. That's coming up. I'm June Grosso. This is Bloomberg.
This is a Bloomberg Money Minute. Today, stocks fell the most since the 2008 financial crisis amid economic panic over the coronavirus. Right now, stocks are down 6%. The Dow falling 1,631 points. S&P down 178 points. Nasdaq dropping 451. Crude oil is down over 19% to $33.30 a barrel as both Russia and Saudi Arabia both plan to increase production, creating an all-out price war. Meanwhile, leading the selling today includes bank stocks, energy firms, and once again cruise line operators after the CDC and the State Department warned Americans to stay away from cruise ships as the coronavirus spreads. In other news, 2 large insurance brokers merge. Aon agreed to buy rival Willis Towers Watson for $30 billion. It's the industry's largest deal ever. Donna Wilson, Bloomberg Radio.
Okay, kids, Dad's gonna teach you how to dance. First, spread your feet apart. Then, pump your knee, nod your head, shake your hips, and bite your lip ever so slightly. Now, with one hand in the air, point at people with the other hand. I call that the rock star.
Dance like a dad. It's a great way to make a moment with your kids.
Now, make a face like it just smells something bad.
Visit fatherhood.gov. Brought to you by the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services and the Ad Council.
Are you interested in a challenging and exciting career? One where you can be part of solving complex challenges across industries and geographies? Bloomberg's ever-expanding technology, data, news, and media services foster innovation, empower clients, and offer nearly limitless opportunities for career growth. Visit Bloomberg.com/careers today to view our current job opportunities. Bloomberg LP is an equal opportunity employer. The address once again is Bloomberg.com/careers.
It's a jungle in there, impenetrable, with tiny creatures running wild. Cut through their trail of cake and crumbs,
with the intrepid new Miele Triflex 3-in-1 cordless vacuum. It's a hand stick for twisting terrain, an upright for open spaces, and a handheld for the upper reaches. Get a 60-minute runtime and a 1 in 10 chance of winning £250 cash when you buy any Miele Triflex cordless cleaner. Heroes of the home at Curry's PC World. Terms and register at curryswin250.co.uk.
Have you heard? The Mayor of London has launched his latest van scrappage scheme to help tackle London's toxic air. Small businesses or sole traders like me with a polluting van could now get £7,000, which you could use to trade up to a Euro 6 vehicle. And you could get an extra £2,500 towards running costs if you go electric. The scheme is now even easier to qualify for, and it's open to any businesses with up to 50 employees, like mine. So, I'm going to search TfL Scrappage to see if I'm eligible and apply. You should do the same. To the Mayor of London and TfL, every journey matters.
This week on the New Yorker Radio Hour, we'll ask whether America is ready to elect a Democratic Socialist for president. Plus, the science fiction legend William Gibson on climate change and the end of the future.
How often do you hear the phrase, the 22nd century? Don't hear it. We no longer have that sense of cultural anticipation.
Listen to this episode of the New Yorker Radio Hour on TuneIn today.
When you're not listening to your team, take it to the end zone, the rim, or the net. Keep up with the biggest moments in sports by following TuneIn on social media.
Block, Cook into the end zone for the touchdown.
From reminders of the live top games to tips of the best sports stations and podcasts.
Welcome to Undisputed. We are live from Los Angeles. I'm Jenny Taft here with Skip
Follow
Bayless.
at TuneIn on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram to get the most out of TuneIn.
The puck drops. 12 players face off to win. The suspense is pure torture, but you wouldn't miss this for the world. TuneIn brings you every minute of the NHL season. Listen live to hockey when it matters most on TuneIn.
Are you curious what others are listening to on TuneIn? Head to the trending section under Browse to see the most popular stations and podcasts among TuneIn listeners right now. Check it out. You might just discover something new for yourself.
In for this hour of Balance of Power. Coming up, we're going to be talking about that market slump. Is the longest ever bull market in jeopardy? And also, remember the subpoenas for former White House counsel Don McGahn? Well, they're still winding their way up through the appellate courts. And the House wants the full D.C. Circuit to hear them. Right now, though, Charlie Pellet is here with a look at the markets. Charlie.
Hi, thank you very much, June Grasso. Here's what's going on. Let's get right to the numbers. I'll give you the why in just a moment. Got to begin with the 10-year, 0.50% right now on the 10-year. The Dow, the S&P, NASDAQ, all plunging. S&P down 190. That is a drop of 6.4%. The Dow is down 1,765 points, down 6.8%. And NASDAQ is plunging 485 points. That is a drop of 5.7%. So far this year right now, the S&P is looking at a drop of almost 14%. Stocks plunging. They are whipsawing back from losses that did top 7% and triggered a trading halt in the early going as a full-blown oil price war rattles financial markets already on edge over the spreading coronavirus. Oil, West Texas Intermediate plunging 20.5% now, down $8.48 a barrel at $32.80. Brent crude at $36.05 barrel of Brent, down by 20.3%. Now, what about retail and the coronavirus? Dana Telsey is Chief Research Officer at Telsey Advisory Group.
But I think the focus on what people are buying, you can call it hoarding, you can call it household essentials, but they're buying what they need. Wants come later. I think when you have kids' schools being closed, when you have athletic events being delayed, conferences being rescheduled, travel slowing, the here and now is what do we need to do to keep our families healthy?
And again, the here and now, we've got the 10-year 0.50%. Gold up little change, but up by less than 0.1% right now. $16.75 the ounce. Oil, again, a major story. West Texas Intermediate crude plunging 20.3%. Let's recap the equity markets. S&P down 192 points, down 6.5%. The Dow down 1,771 points, down 6.9%. Nasdaq down 489 points, a drop there of 5.8%. I'm Charlie Pellet. That's a Bloomberg Business Flash. Balance of Power continues. Once again, here she is, your host, June Grosso.
Thank you, Charlie. Well, you heard the numbers from Charlie. The S&P down now about 18% from its February 19th all-time high, threatening to end the record-long bull market that began 11 years ago to the day. Joining me is Jeff Powell, managing partner at Polaris Greystone. So, Jeff, how should we be talking about the markets? How should we be thinking about them right now?
Well, it seems like right now we're in complete panic mode. I mean, between the oil war, price wars that are going on, and obviously we're continuing to see more and more cases of the COVID-19 coronavirus as it continues to spread as we expected throughout the United States.
Now, so we're going to see more and more headlines every day, probably for quite some time, about more cases of coronavirus in different states, more people being affected by it, more closures of schools and businesses. Is that priced into the market at this point, or we're going to see further declines?
You know, I think it's really all about how people will react to it. I mean, Governor Cuomo, I think, made a very positive statement. I mean, if you're looking at things like influenza, for example, over 30 million Americans have already had it this year. Almost 300,000 people have been hospitalized, and the estimate by the CDC is over 20,000 Americans have passed just this flu season alone from that. We're not seeing the same sort of number of deaths in the United States from the COVID virus. I think that it's a lot to do with that it is kind of a higher death rate, you know, a newer thing to our markets that we haven't seen. We've never seen a kind of spread like this for a very long time of a coronavirus. So people are a lot more at edge. And so when we have people more at edge, we run the risk of a number of things, including people closing their wallets, a potential of having us move from what was decent economic growth into a recession. There's a lot of things that are still quite unknown with this market that could send it further down.
Can you compare the transitory nature of this to the systemic financial crisis in 2008?
I think they're two wildly different things. I mean, obviously, this could grow into a systemic financial crisis because of how people react. You had an analyst on a little earlier that was talking about consumer discretionary versus consumer staples purchases. So people are going out, they are spending their money, but they are going into places like Walmart, Costco, Target, and other places, finding things like hand sanitizer and buying, shelf life items like soup, rather than going out and buying a new pair of Lululemon, yoga pants, for example. So I think that it really kind of depends on the reaction as this becomes the new norm. If people are less frightened about what this truly means, I mean, over 80% of the cases of the COVID-19 are no worse than the average flu. Where this is tending to affect most people are those that are already at risk for health conditions. So your elderly that already have things like cancer or respiratory issues already, you're seeing them most at risk for passing away than your normal American that's walking down the street that really probably, if worse comes to worse, may not even know the difference of them having the coronavirus versus having just the common flu.
Ray Dalio and Lloyd Blankfein tweeted today words of encouragement with the Bridgewater Associates founder saying, look for the opportunities. The former Goldman Sachs CEO stressing the U.S. economy's strength. Do you agree with them? And do those kinds of tweets help? It doesn't seem to have helped that much.
Well, it certainly doesn't help on a day like today when we
seems like nothing would really help today.
A day like today is definitely just kind of hold on to the arms of your chair and watch more than react. For us, we have already moved into a defensive stake. I mean, we're sitting at more than 30% cash on our average strategies. We've also moved into lower beta investments, so the reaction that we're seeing in our portfolios today are dramatically less than what we're seeing within the stock markets. We're seeing less than half of the losses within this market. There will be amazing opportunities out there. What you really want to be looking at with those opportunities, however, are, is it something that is backlogged that has a demand that will be, forward, or is it something that will be passed? I mean, with a cruise line, if people are canceling their trips, you're not going to be able to go back and refill past trips. But what you can be looking at is, somebody who is putting off a purchase of a cell phone, or they need new clothes for whatever next season is, and they're going to go out and buy that once things are calming down a little bit. So it really kind of depends on where in the market you're looking. Things like the cruise lines and the airlines, they will return. Having them lose 2/3 of their value here in most cases over the course of the last couple weeks is probably an overreaction. The cruise line industry and the airline industry are not going to go out of business, but they do obviously need to temper. We need to see a calming down of what's going on in the markets before it would be worth stepping in and buying those types of things. We have the adage of not buying or not catching a falling knife, so we'll wait for this to settle down a little bit before we're going in.
About a minute here, Jeff. So Scott Minard of Guggenheim Partners, co-founder and global chief investment officer, said a global recession may be inevitable, with the markets finally waking up to the risk of financial and geopolitical contagion from the coronavirus. Do you agree with that?
It's certainly a possibility. I mean, again, when you have school closures, just as an example, I mean, most of the United States has people that are a dual income family. Who's going to stay home with the kids? Are you going to be as productive working from home as you would in the office when you are chasing around your children, feeding them breakfast, lunch, and dinner, and not being able to spend the same amount of time that you would typically on work in those types of situations? That's just one example. Think about the number of conferences that have been canceled. Think about how that impacts the airline industry and hotels. Think about the entertainment industry and how much this is having an impact on it. These are things that are very real.
Thanks so much, Jeff. We'll have to leave it there. A lot more to come. That's Jeff Powell, managing partner at Polaris Greystone. Coming up, we're going to be talking about the House asking for the full D.C. Circuit Court of Appeals, all 16 judges, to hear the case on its subpoena for former White House counsel Don McGahn. I'm June Grosso. This is Bloomberg.
Hey, y'all. Jeff Foxworthy here. Now, if you've ever found yourself repeating the same thing over and over for 75 years, you might be Smokey Bear.
Only you can prevent wildfires.
That's why I'm filling in for Smokey to switch things up, because there's a lot more to say. And I should know because my grandfather was a firefighter. And one of the things he taught me is that the people that love the outdoors the most are often the ones accidentally starting wildfires, which means always BYOB. No, bring your own bucket to the campfire. And be extra careful with things like burning yard trimmings. Don't just walk away, or chances are you might be starting a wildfire. So for the love of the outdoors, go to SmokeyBear.com to learn more about wildfire prevention. Brought to you by the U.S. Forest Service, your state forester, and the Ad Council.
25 years ago, NJIT graduate Dick Sweeney co-founded Keurig Green Mountain, a company whose incredible innovations changed the way the world brews a cup of coffee. Today, he lectures widely on business leadership and is a strong advocate for NJIT's work to combine business education with the power of STEM.
NJIT is definitely fostering the innovative thinking for budding entrepreneurs simply because that's the world we live in. NJIT is producing students that have been trained, educated, and given the business acumen to be a contributor to a company. The distinct mission is to develop great STEM scholars. The attributes I've always looked for in team members are heart, smarts, guts, and luck. So we want people with passion, intelligence, courage, and never discount luck. The student coming out of NJIT has experienced all of that.
NJIT, New Jersey Institute of Technology. Learn more at njit.edu.
The Bloomberg Business of Sports podcast.
How did the Yankees become this mega valuable team?
Where the money is flowing inside sports around the globe.
From the marketing perspective, where are the dollars spent?
From union heads to team owners, Scott Soshnick and Michael Barr speak to the names that power this multi-billion-dollar industry.
Boston Red Sox CEO Sam Kennedy.
National Hockey League Commissioner Gary Bettman.
Bloomberg Business of Sports. Listen today on Bloomberg.com, the Bloomberg Business app, or subscribe on Apple Podcasts.
Asset managers who seize change to launch new strategies, add distribution channels, or exploit new technology to re-engineer the investor experience are often rewarded. However, in an industry paralyzed with complexity, few act with agility or decisively. Few run their businesses strategically, yet the most competitive managers in the market know with the right partner and a flexible operating system, you can. Go boldly toward change with SEI Investment Manager Services.
I'm Steve Meyer, president of SEI's Investment Manager Services. At SEI, we understand the emerging forces that will define success for asset managers and what firms will need to compete tomorrow. That's why we continually optimize SEI's global operating platform. If your business requires greater agility, our advanced technology, integrated best-in-class systems, and multi-asset expertise can be your catalyst for business transformation.
With SEI Investment Manager Services, you lead the charge in a competitive marketplace. Learn more at SEIC.com/seize change.
Sweet strawberry icing. You're in Goodwill and just past that vintage denim jacket you spot miniature donut earrings. You lean in. That's the scent of shopping success. Because at Goodwill, every item you buy funds local job training and more. So bring home those donut earrings and bring home so much good to your community. Goodwill. Bring good home. Brought to you by Goodwill and the Ad Council.
Business is constantly evolving. Is your financial printer evolving to keep ahead of the curve? At Command Financial, we are redefining financial printing by providing industry-leading expertise, leveraging technology, and honing processes and best practices. Every day, Command helps SEC registrants, as well as members of their working groups, including securities attorneys and investment bankers, prepare, file, and disseminate regulatory and disclosure documents, such as registration statements, M&A documents, and mutual fund prospectuses and reports. Command provides a full range of services to help you effectively complete your deal, meet your disclosure requirements, and achieve your shareholder communications objectives. Visit our website at commandfinancial.com and learn how we're evolving, not only with the times, but also with your business requirements. Command Financial, redefining financial printing.
Imagine being denied an apartment because of your religion, or your race, or because you have children, or a disability.
It's so wrong.
Yes, but who has the power to stop this?
You do. Each of us has the power. The law is on your side. It's illegal for landlords to discriminate because of race, color, religion, sex, national origin, disability, or familial status. If you suspect that you have experienced housing discrimination, file a complaint with HUD immediately so we can investigate it. Fair housing is your right.
Use it.
To learn more, visit HUD.gov/fairhousing. That's HUD.gov/fairhousing. Or call 1-800-669